Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Ultimate Fanfiction. We are thrilled to present today's story, What If Harry's Accidental Magic at Age 4 Broke 47 Compulsion Charms and Alerted the Goblin Nation to Dumbledore's Plot. If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The breaking the cupboard under the stairs was dark, but Harry Potter was used to that. What 4-year-old Harry wasn't used to was the crushing feeling in his chest as he curled into himself, trying to be as small as possible. Uncle Vernon had been particularly angry today. Harry's small hands trembled as he traced the fresh bruise forming on his arm where his uncle had grabbed him. All because the cereal box had somehow flown off the top shelf when Dudley was screaming for it. Freakish things, Vernon had muttered, his face an alarming shade of purple. Won't be having it in my house. Harry didn't understand why these strange things kept happening around him. The floating cereal. The time Aunt Petunia cut his hair and it grew back overnight. The sweater that shrank when she tried to force it over his head. A tear slipped down his cheek. He wasn't trying to be bad. Something deep inside him stirred, uncomfortable and foreign. It had always been there, this odd pressure behind his ribs, like something pushing against him from the inside. Tonight it felt worse, like it was struggling to break free. Boy! Aunt Petunia's sharp voice pierced through the thin cupboard door. Stop that sniffling this instant. Harry tried, he really did. He bit his lip and held his breath, but the pressure inside kept building. His small body began to tremble, not from fear but from something else, something powerful trying to escape. Outside the cupboard, the lights in the hallway flickered. Vernon! Petunia called, her voice rising. The lights are acting up again. Heavy footsteps approached. Bloody electrical. I just had it checked last week. The pressure inside Harry intensified. It wasn't just in his chest anymore, it filled his entire body, pressing against his skin from the inside. Something was wrong. This wasn't like the other times when strange things happened. This felt like he was going to burst. Make it stop, he whispered to himself, rocking back and forth. Please make it stop. But it wouldn't stop. The pressure kept building until Harry couldn't breathe. His vision blurred, and a high-pitched ringing filled his ears. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, something inside him snapped. Harry gasped as he felt it, like dozens of invisible threads that had been wrapped tightly around him suddenly broke all at once. The release was immediate and overwhelming. Magic, raw, wild, and unbridled, exploded outward from his small body. The cupboard door blasted off its hinges. The walls of number 4 Privet Drive shook. Every light in the house shattered simultaneously, raining glass down on the perfectly polished floors. Pictures flew off walls. Windows cracked in spiderweb patterns. And at the epicenter was Harry, hovering 3 feet above his cot, his eyes glowing an unearthly emerald green, his messy black hair whipping around his face as though caught in a windstorm. What the devil? Vernon's roar was cut short as he rounded the corner and saw Harry floating in the destroyed cupboard. His face drained of all color before rapidly shifting to purple. You freak. He lunged forward, meaty hands outstretched to grab Harry, but an invisible force threw him backward. Vernon Dursley, all 23 stone of him, sailed through the air and crashed into the living room wall with enough force to crack the plaster. Petunia screamed from the stairs, Dudley howling behind her. Vernon! Harry couldn't control what was happening. The magic was too much, too powerful after being contained for so long. It poured out of him in waves, seeking targets, seeking balance. Objects around the house began to transform, the television turned into a large tortoise, the prized china cabinet became a willow tree that grew straight through the ceiling, the mail that had arrived that morning swirled into the air, folding itself into dozens of paper birds that flew in frantic circles. And still, the magic continued to pour out. Miles away, in the heart of London beneath the streets of Whitehall, alarms began to blare throughout Gringotts Bank. Griphook was young for a goblin banker, barely 70 years old, with sharp features that hadn't yet hardened into the weathered scowls of his elders. His position monitoring the ancestral vaults was meant to be quiet, uneventful, a starting position before he could prove himself worthy of more prestigious assignments. Until tonight. The alarms shrieked through the marble halls, magical sensors detecting a massive surge of power from an unexpected source. Griphook's clawed fingers flew over the ancient detection stones before him, trying to pinpoint the source. "Security breach," asked Nagnok, his supervisor, rushing to his station. "No," Griphook's eyes widened as the readings clarified. "It's an external magical surge, connected to one of our vaults. Ancestral magic." His finger traced the glowing line on the stone tablet before him. "Potter Vault." Nagnok's scarred face contorted with surprise. "The Potter heir? Impossible. He's warded and hidden." "The readings are clear," Griphook insisted, pointing to the surging magical signature. "And there's more. Look at these patterns, these aren't just accidental magic fluctuations. This is a mass breaking of binding spells." The older goblin leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Compulsion charms? On the Potter heir?" He spat on the ground, a goblin curse. "How many?" Griphook's voice was grim. "The readings suggest over 40 distinct magical bindings shattering simultaneously." 47, came a deep voice behind them. Both goblins turned to see Ragnarok, director of Gringotts, his ancient face grave in the dim light. 47 compulsion and binding charms on a magical child. A child under the protection of goblin treaties. The director's fingers curled around his ceremonial axe, the gesture making the younger goblins step back instinctively. To invoke goblin treaties was serious, to violate them was to risk war. Who would dare? Nagnok breathed. Ragnarok's eyes narrowed to slits. Only one wizard had the authority and access to place such bindings after the parents' deaths. He turned to Griphook, who straightened under the direct attention. "You've shown promise, young one. This will be your assignment. Take a retrieval team to the Potter heir immediately. Bring him to Gringotts under our protection." Griphook's heart raced. "Director, I'm just a vault monitor, not a, you detected the breach," Ragnarok cut him off. "You've shown keen insight in your training. The magic has chosen you." His gnarled finger jabbed at the detection stone, where a line of golden light connected directly to Griphook's station. "The Potter Vault magic recognizes you. Go." There was no arguing with the director of Gringotts. Griphook bowed deeply and rushed to gather his team. Harry couldn't stop shaking. The explosion of magic had finally subsided, leaving him crumpled on the floor of the destroyed hallway. The house around him looked like a war zone. Vernon lay unconscious by the living room wall. Petunia huddled on the stairs, clutching a wailing Dudley to her bony chest, her face a mask of terror and hatred. "A monster," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I always knew, just like her, a freak." Harry tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. He felt different, lighter somehow, as if weights he hadn't known he was carrying had been lifted. His thoughts seemed clearer too, sharper. And there was something else, a sense of others, nearby but not visible. Watching. Waiting. The feeling intensified just as the front door, miraculously still intact, blasted inward. Petunia screamed again, pushing herself farther up the stairs, dragging Dudley with her. Harry stared as strange figures entered the house. They were shorter than adults but didn't look like children. Their skin was grayish, their features sharp and fierce, with pointed ears and teeth that looked too sharp to be human. They wore what looked like armor and carried weapons, swords and strange, glowing objects. The leader stepped forward, golden eyes immediately finding Harry among the destruction. "Harry Potter," the creature said, his voice surprisingly gentle despite its gravelly quality. "I am Griphook of Gringotts. We've come to help you." Harry tried to make sense of the words. Gringotts. The name seemed to trigger something in his mind, a flash of a towering white building, marble floors, and gold coins. How do you know my name? He managed to ask. The creature, Griphook, approached slowly, kneeling down to Harry's level. We've been watching over your family's legacy since your parents died. We should have been watching you more closely. His gaze took in the cupboard, the bruises on Harry's arms, and the general state of the house. Much more closely. Another of the strange beings stepped forward. The area is secure, but we'll have ministry officials responding to this much accidental magic soon. We must hurry. Griphook nodded and turned back to Harry. Young Potter, you're in danger here, and not just from these. His gaze flicked to the Dursleys with undisguised disgust. Creatures. Someone has placed powerful spells on you without consent. Spells meant to control and limit you. Will you come with us, under the protection of the Goblin Nation? Harry's head spun with confusion. Goblins? Spells? Ministry? Yet something deep inside him, the same something that had broken free tonight, seemed to recognize the truth in Griphook's words. Will I have to come back here? He asked, voice small. Griphook's expression hardened. Never again, on my honor as a goblin warrior. That was all Harry needed to hear. He nodded, trying to stand again. This time Griphook offered a clawed hand to help him up. You can't take him. Petunia shrieked suddenly from the stairs, finding her voice. Dumbledore said he has to stay here. The protection, silence, Muggle, another goblin snarled, stepping toward her with blade drawn. You forfeited any right to the child when you treated him worse than goblins treat captured enemies. Griphook helped Harry toward the door. Dumbledore, he muttered, almost to himself. Of course. The old manipulator's fingerprints are all over this. Who's Dumbledore? Harry asked, stumbling slightly as they reached the threshold. The man who left you here, Griphook replied grimly. The man who bound your magic and mind with 47 separate compulsion charms. The man who will answer to goblin justice for what he's done. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The neighboring houses were dark and quiet. Apparently, Harry's magical outburst hadn't extended beyond the walls of number 4. How will we? Harry started to ask, but stopped as one of the goblins produced a golden coin from a pouch. Portkey, Griphook explained, noticing Harry's confusion. Magical transportation. It might feel strange the first time. Everyone hold on. The goblins gathered close, all placing a finger on the coin. Griphook kept a steady hand on Harry's shoulder, guiding his small finger to touch the cool metal. Gringotts, the goblin said clearly, and Harry felt a powerful jerk behind his navel. The world dissolved into a whirlwind of color and sound, Privet Drive disappearing as if it had never existed. Albus Dumbledore was enjoying a quiet evening in his office at Hogwarts, contemplating the delicate silver instruments that whirred and puffed on his desk. Each was connected to various wards and monitoring charms, most importantly, those surrounding young Harry Potter. He reached for a lemon drop, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The boy would be raised away from the corrupting influence of fame, kept humble and malleable. When the time came for him to re-enter the wizarding world, he would be perfectly positioned to fulfill his destiny, with Albus's careful guidance, of course. It was all for the greater good. The peaceful moment shattered as every silver instrument on his desk exploded simultaneously. Dumbledore leapt to his feet with surprising agility for a man of his years, wand instantly in hand. No, he whispered, staring in horror at the smoking ruins of his monitoring devices. It's not possible. He rushed to the largest of the damaged instruments, waving his wand in complex patterns, trying to reconnect to the network of spells he'd placed on Harry Potter. Nothing. Fawkes, he called urgently to his Phoenix companion. We must go to Privet Drive immediately. But before he could grab the magnificent bird's tail feathers, his office door burst open. Minerva McGonagall stood in the doorway, her tartan dressing gown hastily thrown over her nightclothes, her face pale with alarm. Albus! The wards around the Potter boy, I know, he cut her off, already striding toward the door. We must hurry. That's not all, Minerva continued, matching his urgent pace down the spiral staircase. I've just received an urgent fire call from the Ministry. Massive accidental magic detected in Surrey. And... She hesitated. Speak plainly, Minerva, Dumbledore urged as they hurried through the castle corridors. A formal notification from Gringotts, she finished. They're invoking the Treaty of 1612 regarding the guardianship of magical children. Dumbledore stopped so abruptly that Minerva nearly collided with him. His face, usually composed, showed genuine alarm. The Goblins have taken Harry Potter, she confirmed, answering his unspoken question. For the first time in many years, Albus Dumbledore felt the cold grip of fear. Not for Harry's safety, the Goblins would not harm the boy, but for his carefully constructed plans. Years of manipulation, of subtle guidance toward the inevitable confrontation with Tom, all potentially undone in a single night. We must go to Gringotts, he said, changing direction toward the castle's entrance. Immediately. Minerva's lips thinned into a tight line. Albus, the notification specifically stated that you are prohibited from entering Gringotts pending investigation. They've cited multiple violations of magical guardianship laws. That's absurd, Dumbledore protested. I am Harry's magical guardian. Are you? Minerva asked, a note of suspicion creeping into her voice. Because the notification mentioned sealed wills and unauthorized assumption of guardianship. Dumbledore's mind raced through contingencies. This was unexpected, but not insurmountable. He still had considerable influence at the Ministry. Contact Cornelius, he instructed. Tell him it's a matter of national security. And find Sirius, I'll need him to accompany me. Sirius? Why would you need him for this? Dumbledore didn't answer, already striding toward the castle doors. He needed to regain control of this situation quickly. Harry Potter was too important to his plans, to the future of the wizarding world. Whatever had happened tonight, whatever had shattered his carefully placed compulsion charms, he would fix it. He had to. The greater good depended on it. Gringotts Bank was a very different place after hours. The grand marble hall that wizards knew was empty of its daytime hustle, the teller's counters vacant. Instead, the space was filled with armed goblin guards and officials moving with urgent purpose. Harry Potter sat on a stone bench, wrapped in a soft blanket a female goblin had kindly provided, watching everything with wide, confused eyes. The journey by Portkey had left him dizzy and disoriented, but that was nothing compared to the bewilderment of suddenly finding himself in an underground bank run by magical creatures. Griphook hadn't left his side since their arrival, fielding questions from other goblins and issuing orders in a harsh, guttural language Harry didn't understand. Are you feeling better, young Potter? The goblin asked, turning his attention back to Harry. Harry nodded hesitantly. I think so. But I don't understand any of this. You said someone put spells on me. Griphook's expression darkened. Yes. Compulsion charms, binding spells, magical suppressors. Layers of them, woven together like a cage around your mind and magic. But why? Harry couldn't comprehend why anyone would want to do such a thing to him. That, came a deeper voice, is what we intend to find out. Harry looked up to see an older, more imposing goblin approaching. His armor was more elaborate than the others, inlaid with what looked like gold and gems, and he carried himself with unmistakable authority. Director Ragnarok, Griphook said, standing straighter. I've secured the Potter heir as ordered. So I see. Ragnarok studied Harry with penetrating eyes. You've had a difficult evening, young one. It wasn't a question, but Harry nodded anyway. The healers are ready, Ragnarok continued, addressing Griphook. We must assess the damage quickly, before any attempt is made to reinstate the bindings. Harry's stomach clenched with fear. Healers. Am I sick? Griphook placed a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder. Not sick, but injured in ways you cannot see. When magic is bound as yours was, it leaves scars. We need to understand what was done to you. It won't hurt, Ragnarok added, his fierce face softening slightly. Goblin healers are the finest in the magical world, especially for injuries caused by malicious spellwork. Harry hesitated only briefly before nodding. These strange creatures had rescued him from the Dursleys and treated him with more kindness in an hour than his relatives had in years. Okay, he agreed softly. They led him deeper into Gringotts, down corridors carved from solid stone and lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Harry tried to memorize the route, but soon lost track of the many turns and intersections. Finally, they entered a large circular chamber. Unlike the rough stone corridors, this room was finished in polished marble with strange symbols etched into the floor and walls. In the center stood a raised platform surrounded by what looked like crystal pillars. Several goblins in white robes waited beside the platform. Unlike the warrior goblins Harry had seen so far, these moved with a gentler demeanor, their hands bearing chalices from herbs and potions rather than weapons. This is Healer Silverthorn, Griphook introduced a female goblin whose silver-streaked hair was braided with tiny bells that chimed softly as she moved. She's our most experienced mind healer. Silverthorn approached Harry without the wariness he'd noticed in some of the other goblins. Hello, young wizard, she said, her voice melodic despite its gravelly undertone. May I examine you? Harry nodded, though his nervousness must have shown on his face. There's nothing to fear, she assured him. I'll simply use goblin magic to see what human magic has done to you. Please lie on the stone. The platform looked hard and cold, but when Harry climbed up and lay down, he found it surprisingly warm and comfortable, almost conforming to his small body. Close your eyes, Silverthorn instructed gently. Try to relax. You may feel a tingling sensation or see colors behind your eyelids. This is normal. Harry did as he was told, letting his eyes fall shut. Almost immediately, he felt it, a gentle probing sensation, like cool fingers brushing against his mind. It didn't hurt, in fact, it was rather soothing. Behind his closed eyelids, colors began to bloom, primarily a deep, rich red that somehow felt like it belonged to him, shot through with threads of gold. But there were other colors too, dark, murky patches of gray and purple, tangled webs of sickly yellow, and at the center of his forehead, a pulsing knot of pure black. He could hear the goblins murmuring around him, their voices becoming increasingly agitated. The gentle probe became more focused, concentrating on specific areas before moving on. By the ancient gold, he heard Silverthorn whisper. I've never seen anything like this. What do you find, healer? Ragnarok's voice was tense. Multiple layers of compulsion magic, most now broken but still leaving magical residue. Memory charms. Core bindings to restrict his natural power. Emotion manipulators tied to specific people and concepts. And this. There was a pause. This dark magic in the scar, it's unlike anything I've encountered. Harry wanted to open his eyes, to ask questions, but found himself drifting in a strange, peaceful state as the examination continued. Time lost meaning as the goblin healer's magic mapped the damage done to him. Finally, the colors faded and the probing sensation withdrew. Harry blinked his eyes open to find a circle of grim-faced goblins surrounding the platform. What's wrong? He asked, his voice small in the sudden silence. Griphook helped him sit up. Nothing that cannot be fixed, young Potter. But it seems the damage is extensive. Silverthorn was conferring quietly with Ragnarok, both occasionally glancing at Harry with expressions that mixed anger and concern. Can someone please explain what's happening? Harry asked, his voice stronger now, edged with frustration. I don't understand any of this. Ragnarok approached, his fierce demeanor somewhat gentled. You deserve explanations, heir of Potter. But first, may I ask if you know anything about your parents? About how they died? Harry frowned. They died in a car crash. That's how I got this. He pointed to the lightning scar on his forehead. The goblins exchanged dark looks. A car crash, Ragnock repeated, anger evident in his tone. Is that what those muggles told you? Harry nodded uncertainly. Young Potter, Griphook said gently, your parents were not killed in any muggle accident. They were murdered by a dark wizard, the darkest of our age. They died protecting you. Harry stared at him, uncomprehending. Murdered? By a wizard? Your parents were wizards too, Silverthorn added. Powerful ones. As are you. I'm a wizard. Harry whispered. Did you think what happened tonight was normal? Griphook asked with a hint of amusement. The accidental magic that broke your bindings was extraordinary, even for a wizard. Harry's mind whirled with this new information. Wizards. Magic. His parents murdered rather than killed in an accident. It was overwhelming, yet somehow, it felt right. Like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. The wizard who killed them, Harry asked hesitantly, what was his name? Another uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Most in our world do not speak his name, Ragnock finally said. He was called Lord Voldemort. And he gave me this scar. Harry's hand moved to his forehead. Yes, Silverthorn confirmed. And left something behind, a fragment of dark magic that should never have been allowed to remain in a child. It's one of many things we need to address in your healing. Harry took a deep breath, trying to process everything. And the person who put the spells on me. Albus Dumbledore, Griphook said, no longer bothering to hide his anger. Headmaster of Hogwarts School, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. A man with too many titles and too much power, who decided your life was his to control. But why? Harry persisted. Why would he do that to me? Ragnock stepped forward. That is what we must discover. But first, we need to complete your healing and secure your position. Dumbledore will not relinquish control easily. As if summoned by his words, a young goblin rushed into the chamber. Director. Dumbledore is at the main entrance, demanding to see the Potter boy. He's brought the Minister of Magic and several Aurors. Ragnock's expression hardened. Activate the ancient protections. No wizard enters Gringotts tonight without Goblin permission. He turned to Harry. It seems our time is short. We must proceed with the purging ritual immediately, before any attempt is made to reclaim you. Harry glanced nervously between the goblins. Will it hurt? Silverthorn answered honestly. Some parts may be uncomfortable, especially removing the dark magic from your scar. But we will do everything possible to minimize your pain. Harry thought of the cupboard, of Uncle Vernon's purple face, of years of being told he was worthless. He thought of the lies about his parents, and the strange compulsions that had apparently been controlling him his whole life. Let's do it, he said, squaring his small shoulders with determination that impressed the watching goblins. Griphook smiled, showing pointed teeth. You have your mother's courage, Harry Potter. Albus Dumbledore stood at the sealed doors of Gringotts Bank, his usual grandfatherly demeanor replaced by cold fury. Beside him, Cornelius Fudge shifted uncomfortably in his pinstriped robes, his lime-green bowler hat clutched in nervous hands. This is outrageous, Dumbledore stated, addressing the goblin guard who blocked their path. I am Harry Potter's magical guardian. You have no right to take him. The goblin guard, Steelhack, maintained his impassive stance. Gringotts has invoked ancient treaty rights regarding abused magical children. The investigation is ongoing. Investigation? Fudge sputtered. What investigation? See here, I'm the Minister of Magic. You can't simply, Minister, Steelhack interrupted, his voice dangerously calm, goblin treaties predate your ministry by centuries. When evidence of systematic magical abuse against an heir of an ancient house is discovered, we have both the right and obligation to intervene. Dumbledore stepped forward, his magic swirling visibly around him in a display of power. I demand to speak with Ragnarok. Director Ragnarok is currently overseeing the healing of young Potter, Steelhack replied, unmoved by the display. The damage is extensive. What damage? Asked a sharp voice from behind Dumbledore. The wizards turned to see Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, striding toward them, two Aurors at her heels. Amelia, Dumbledore acknowledged with a tight nod. The Goblins have taken Harry Potter. So I've heard, she replied coolly. What I haven't heard is why 47 unauthorized compulsion charms were found on the boy who lived. Dumbledore's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. I placed certain protections on Harry for his own safety. Given the circumstances of his parents' deaths, compulsion charms are not protections, Albus, Amelia cut him off. They're illegal when used on a child without parental or guardian consent. And according to the notification I received, you were never legally established as Harry's guardian. Fudge looked between them in confusion. Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Dumbledore has always acted in the boy's best interests. Has he? Amelia challenged. Then perhaps he can explain why the Potter wills were sealed against the parents' explicit instructions. Or why Harry Potter was placed with Muggle relatives who were specifically excluded as potential guardians in those wills. Dumbledore's expression hardened. The wills were sealed for Harry's protection. The blood wards at his aunt's home were the strongest protection I could provide. Blood wards? Amelia's eyebrows rose. Unsanctioned blood magic, Albus? On top of everything else? The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of another goblin, this one wearing the insignia of a senior bank official. Madam Bones, the goblin addressed her with a respectful nod, ignoring both Dumbledore and Fudge entirely. Director Ragnarok requests your presence inside. Alone. Amelia nodded briskly. Lead the way. Now see here. Fudge blustered. As minister, I should, minister, Amelia said firmly, this appears to be a matter of illegal magic used against a child. That falls under DMLE jurisdiction. I suggest you return to the ministry and prepare for what may be a significant legal situation. Dumbledore stepped forward. I insist on accompanying you, Amelia. As chief warlock, as potential subject of an investigation, she corrected him, you'll remain outside until questioned officially. Aurors Shacklebolt and Robards will ensure no one enters without Goblin permission. With that, she followed the Goblin through the now open doors, which sealed shut behind her with an ominous thud, leaving Dumbledore staring at solid bronze. For the first time in many years, Albus Dumbledore found himself outmaneuvered, and he didn't like the feeling at all. Deep beneath Gringotts, Harry lay at the center of a complex ritual circle. 7 goblin healers, including Silverthorn, stood at key points around him, chanting in the ancient goblin tongue. The chamber was lit only by enchanted blue flames that cast strange, shifting shadows across the stone walls. Harry tried to remain still as instructed, but it was difficult. The purging ritual had been ongoing for nearly an hour, and parts of it had indeed been painful. The removal of each layer of compulsion magic had felt like peeling off bandages that had been stuck to his skin for too long, uncomfortable but also relieving. Now they had reached the most difficult part, the dark magic embedded in his scar. We're approaching the final stage, young Potter, Silverthorn informed him during a brief pause in the chanting. This will be the most challenging. The dark fragment is resistant. Harry nodded bravely, though his heart hammered in his chest. I'm ready. Griphook, who had remained nearby throughout the ritual despite not being a healer, gave him an encouraging nod. You've shown great strength already. Just a bit longer. The chanting resumed, more intense now, the guttural goblin language rising and falling in complex patterns. The blue flames flared higher, and Harry felt something shift inside his scar, something angry and alive that suddenly seemed aware of what was happening. Pain lanced through his forehead, white-hot and blinding. Harry gasped, his back arching involuntarily. It felt like something was trying to burrow deeper into his head, clinging desperately to maintain its hold. "Fight it, Harry Potter," Griphook urged from somewhere beyond the pain. "Your will against its will." Harry tried to focus, to push against the invasive presence he could now feel so clearly. How had he never noticed it before? This malevolent awareness that had been riding along inside him for years. The chanting intensified, and Harry felt goblin magic washing over him, trying to help, to give him strength. He seized that strength, adding it to his own determination. "Get out!" He thought fiercely at the presence. "You don't belong here. Get out!" A high, cold scream filled the chamber, not from Harry's mouth, but from his scar. Black, oily smoke began to pour from the lightning-shaped mark, coalescing into a writhing mass above him. The goblin healers redoubled their efforts, their chanting reaching a crescendo as they directed their magic to contain the escaping darkness. With a final, unearthly shriek, the dark mass was pulled into a prepared crystal vessel, which Silverthorn immediately sealed with molten silver. Harry collapsed back onto the stone, exhausted but feeling lighter than he could ever remember. The constant pressure he'd lived with his entire life, both from Dumbledore's compulsions and the dark presence in his scar, was gone. For the first time, he could feel his own magic clearly, a warm, vibrant energy flowing freely through him, no longer constrained by artificial barriers. "It's done," Silverthorn announced, her voice tired but satisfied. "The fragment is contained, and the compulsions are broken." Griphook moved to Harry's side, helping him sit up slowly. "How do you feel?" Harry considered the question seriously. "Different. Like I've been wearing clothes that were too tight my whole life, and someone finally gave me the right size." He reached up to touch his scar, which now felt cool and ordinary, just a raised line on his skin rather than the constant, low-grade irritation it had always been. "A good description," Silverthorn approved. "The bindings on your magic were severely restricting your natural growth. You may find your abilities developing rapidly now that they're removed." "There's someone here to see you," Ragnarok announced, entering the chamber with a stern-looking witch in official-looking robes. The witch stopped short when she saw Harry, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Merlin's beard," she whispered. "He looks just like James, but with Lily's eyes." Harry perked up at the mention of his parents. "You knew my mum and dad?" The witch composed herself and approached. "I did. I'm Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Your father was one of my Aurors, magical law enforcement officers," she explained, seeing his confusion. "And your mother consulted for my department occasionally. They were exceptional people." Harry drank in this new information hungrily. No one had ever told him anything real about his parents before. "Director Ragnarok has informed me of the situation," Amelia continued, her expression grave. "I want you to know, Mr. Potter, that what was done to you was illegal under wizarding law. Multiple violations that will be fully investigated." "Dumbledore," Harry said, the name feeling strange on his tongue. "He's the one who did it." "It appears so," Amelia confirmed. "He's currently outside, demanding access to you." Harry felt a flicker of fear. "Does he want to put the spells back on me?" "He won't get the chance," Griphook stated firmly. "You're under Goblin protection now." "And DMLE protection," Amelia added. "Dumbledore has significant political power, but even he is not above the law." She paused, studying Harry carefully. "Mr. Potter, Harry, I need to ask, do you want to return to your Muggle relatives?" "No." The answer came immediately, forcefully. "Please don't make me go back there." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "Were they unkind to you, Harry?" Harry hesitated, years of conditioning making him reluctant to speak ill of the Dursleys to authorities. But with the compulsions gone, he found the courage to be honest. "They kept me in a cupboard," he said quietly. "They called me Freak instead of my name. Uncle Vernon Wood. He glanced down at the fading bruises on his arms. Amelia's expression darkened dangerously. I see. Rest assured, you will not be returning there. Director Ragnarok and I have been discussing alternatives. The Potter wills must be unsealed, Ragnarok stated. They contain the parents' wishes for guardianship. Until then, Harry Potter will remain under Goblin protection. I've already filed the paperwork to unseal the wills, Amelia assured him. It should be processed by morning. In the meantime. She turned to Harry. Would you be comfortable staying here at Gringotts tonight? You'll be safe, and I can return tomorrow once the wills are unsealed. Harry nodded, relief washing over him. The thought of never having to return to Privet Drive was almost too wonderful to believe. Excellent, Ragnarok declared. Griphook will show you to suitable quarters. Our healers have recommended rest as your magic stabilizes. As if to emphasize the point, Harry yawned widely, the exhaustion of the ritual and the emotional turmoil of the day finally catching up with him. Before I go, Amelia said, there's the matter of Dumbledore waiting outside. Any messages you'd like me to convey? Harry thought for a moment, new clarity in his mind helping him articulate feelings he'd never been able to before. Tell him, Harry said slowly, that I know what he did. And I won't let anyone control me like that again. Amelia's lips curved in a small, approving smile. I'll deliver that message word for word, Mr. Potter. In a spacious chamber deep within Gringotts, Harry Potter slept peacefully for perhaps the first time in his life. Free from compulsions, free from the dark presence that had shared his head for years, his magic hummed contentedly around him, occasionally manifesting in small, beautiful displays of light that danced across the ceiling of the room. Outside in the main hall of Gringotts, Amelia Bones delivered Harry's message to a visibly shaken Albus Dumbledore. And in the shadows of the bank, a young goblin named Griphook began the most important assignment of his career, uncovering the full extent of Dumbledore's manipulations and the true legacy of the Potter family. The wheels of fate, so carefully arranged by Dumbledore for his greater good, had been knocked violently off course by the accidental magic of a 4-year-old boy. Nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 2, The Discovery. Harry awoke to unfamiliar surroundings. The bed beneath him was soft, softer than anything he'd ever slept on, and the room around him was spacious and warm, lit by a gentle golden glow that seemed to emanate from the stone walls themselves. For a moment, he thought he might be dreaming. Then the memories of the previous night flooded back, the explosion of magic, the goblins, the ritual that had freed him from, what had they called them? Compulsion charms. He sat up, marveling at how different he felt. His thoughts seemed sharper, clearer than ever before. Even his vision appeared improved, he could see details across the room without his glasses, though nearby objects still blurred slightly. Good morning, young Potter, came a now familiar gravelly voice. Harry turned to see Griphook entering through a curved doorway, carrying a tray laden with food. You've slept for 14 hours, the goblin informed him, setting the tray on a small table near the bed. Healer Silverthorn said that was to be expected. Your mind and magic needed time to adjust. 14 hours. Harry slid out of bed, noticing he wore soft cotton pajamas that definitely weren't his own. I've never slept that long before. The compulsions were likely interrupting your natural sleep patterns, Griphook explained, gesturing toward the food. You should eat. We have a busy day ahead. The tray held an assortment of unfamiliar foods, strange pastries filled with what looked like meat and vegetables, a bowl of porridge topped with berries and gold-colored honey, and a steaming mug of something that smelled like chocolate but with an earthier undertone. Harry approached cautiously. At the Dursleys, food was often withheld as punishment, and he'd learned to be wary of unexpected offerings. It's not poisoned, Griphook said dryly, noting his hesitation. If we wanted you dead, there are far more efficient methods than breakfast. Despite himself, Harry laughed. He was beginning to appreciate the goblin's straightforward manner. Thank you, he said, picking up one of the meat pastries. It was delicious, flaky crust surrounding savory, perfectly seasoned filling. As Harry ate, Griphook moved about the room, opening a wardrobe to reveal child-sized robes and other clothing. "These were procured for you this morning," he explained. "Your previous garments were deemed unsuitable." Harry glanced down at the new pajamas he wore, then at the fine clothes in the wardrobe. "These are for me." "But I don't have any money to." "You have more than enough money," Griphook interrupted. "The Potter vaults are among the oldest and wealthiest in Gringotts. These expenses are negligible." Harry paused mid-bite. "I have vaults." "As in, more than one?" "The Potter family has maintained accounts with Gringotts for 7 centuries, Griphook confirmed. "The family vault, your trust vault, various investment portfolios, and properties across Britain and Europe. You're quite wealthy, young Potter." Harry tried to process this information. He'd gone from having nothing, wearing Dudley's cast-offs and being told he was a burden, to apparently having vaults full of wizard money overnight. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Because knowledge is power," Griphook said grimly. "And certain individuals preferred to keep you powerless." A knock at the door interrupted further discussion. A younger goblin entered and spoke rapidly to Griphook in their native language. "It seems," Griphook translated for Harry's benefit, "that Madam Bones has returned with the unsealed Potter wills. Director Ragnarok requests our presence once you're ready." Harry hurried to finish his breakfast and change into the new clothes, simple black trousers, a crisp white shirt, and dark blue robes that felt impossibly light and comfortable compared to Dudley's old clothes. "You look proper now," Griphook commented approvingly. "Like the heir of an ancient house should." Harry caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror as they left the room and barely recognized the boy looking back. Without the oversized clothes and with his magic flowing freely, he somehow looked less scrawny, his posture straighter, his green eyes brighter. The lightning scar was still there, but it had faded to a thin, silver line rather than the angry red mark it had been before. "Why does everyone keep calling me an heir?" he asked as they navigated the stone corridors of Gringotts. "What does that mean exactly?" "The Potter family is one of Britain's ancient and noble houses, wizarding bloodlines that have maintained significant magical power and influence for centuries," Griphook explained. "As the last Potter, you're the heir to everything that entails wealth, political power, family magic, and certain responsibilities within wizarding society." They reached a set of ornate double doors guarded by armored goblins who nodded respectfully to Griphook before allowing them to pass. The chamber beyond was clearly some sort of meeting room, dominated by a large round table of polished black stone. Director Ragnarok was already present, along with Amelia Bones and several other individuals Harry didn't recognize, both wizards and goblins. "Ah, Mr. Potter," Amelia greeted him, her expression warming slightly. "You're looking much better this morning." Harry nodded shyly, suddenly feeling very small among all these important-looking adults. "Please, take a seat," Ragnarok indicated a chair that had been raised slightly to accommodate Harry's height. "We have much to discuss." Once Harry was settled, Ragnarok addressed the room. "We are gathered for the formal reading of the last will and testament of James and Lily Potter, unsealed this morning by order of the DMLE. Madam Bones, if you would proceed." Amelia nodded and unrolled an official-looking scroll sealed with red wax. "As head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, I hereby certify that these wills have been verified as authentic and magically binding." She broke the seal, and the parchment glowed briefly before settling. Then, to Harry's astonishment, his father's voice filled the room. "This is the last will and testament of James Charles Potter, made on October 14, 1981. Being of sound mind and magic, I declare all previous wills null and void. First, to my son, Harry James Potter, I leave everything, the Potter family vaults, properties, investments, and heirlooms. May you carry our family legacy with the same pride and joy I have. Harry, if you're hearing this, then your mother and I are gone. Know that we loved you beyond measure, and our greatest wish was to see you grow up happy, loved, and free to become your own person. Whatever darkness claimed us, never doubt that we fought with everything we had to stay with you. Now, regarding Harry's guardianship, under no circumstances is our son to be placed with Petunia and Vernon Dursley. Petunia's hatred of magic and Vernon's violent temperament make them utterly unsuitable guardians. Instead, Harry's guardianship should be assigned in the following order of preference: 1. Sirius Black, Harry's godfather by ritual and magic. 2. Alice and Frank Longbottom, with whom we've established reciprocal guardianship arrangements for our children. 3. Minerva McGonagall, who has agreed to serve as a tertiary guardian. 4. Amelia Bones, whose judgment and principles we trust implicitly. If none of these individuals are available, Harry should be placed with a vetted magical family, not with the Dursleys. This point cannot be stressed strongly enough. Furthermore, Albus Dumbledore is explicitly denied any guardianship role, magical or otherwise, over our son. While we respect Albus as a leader in the fight against Voldemort, we have grown increasingly concerned by his tendency to manipulate rather than collaborate, and his disturbing interest in Harry's future role in the wizarding world. To Sirius Black, I leave 100,000 galleons and the cottage in Hogsmeade. Padfoot, watch over Harry for us. Teach him to laugh, to prank, to fly, and to live without fear. To Remus Lupin, I leave 100,000 galleons and a cabin in Yorkshire. Moony, I've arranged for this property to include special accommodations for your furry little problem. Your friendship has been one of the greatest blessings of my life. To Peter Pettigrew, I leave 50,000 galleons and my gratitude for keeping our secret. If we've died while under the Fidelius charm, however, I leave you nothing but the justice you deserve for your betrayal. The voice paused, then continued in a more somber tone, one final note: if Voldemort has specifically targeted us, know that we switched secret keepers from Sirius to Peter at the last moment. If we have been betrayed, Sirius is innocent, and Peter is guilty. I've filed this information with the DMLE, but include it here as additional insurance. This concludes my will. Mischief managed. The voice faded, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Harry sat frozen, overwhelmed by hearing his father's voice for the first time in his memory. Tears welled in his eyes, but he fought to keep them contained, not wanting to cry in front of everyone. Amelia Bones looked pale but composed as she unrolled a second scroll. And now, the will of Lily Potter. Another glow, and then a woman's voice, his mother's voice, filled the chamber. This is the last will and testament of Lily Evans Potter, recorded October 14, 1981. To my son, Harry, everything I have is yours, my personal vault, my research journals, my library, and most importantly, my unconditional love. You were the greatest joy of my life, my darling boy. I affirm all guardianship arrangements specified in James's will, with the additional emphatic statement that under no circumstances is my sister Petunia or her husband to be given custody of Harry. Their disdain for magic would make Harry's life unbearable. If you're hearing this, Harry, I want you to know how special you are, not because of any prophecy or destiny others might claim for you, but because of who you are in your heart. Trust yourself. Question authority. And know that magic is neither light nor dark, it's the intention behind it that matters. A specific note regarding Albus Dumbledore: while I respect the headmaster, I've become increasingly concerned by his secretive nature and his unsettling interest in Harry's role in defeating Voldemort. He is expressly forbidden from assuming any guardianship over Harry, and any magical bindings or compulsions he may attempt to place on my son are hereby preemptively rejected by my magic as his mother. To Severus Snape, I leave my forgiveness and my potions journals. Sev, we took different paths, but you were my first friend in the magical world. I hope you find peace. To Alice Longbottom, I leave my collection of rare charms texts and my eternal gratitude for your friendship. Watch over Neville and Harry both, I suspect they'll need each other in the years to come. If we have died at Voldemort's hands, there's something crucial the wizarding world should know: he's created Horcruxes, multiple ones. This information comes from research I've conducted based on his known activities and certain magical signatures I've detected. The details are in my sealed research journals in the Potter family vault. I've also been researching ancient protection rituals. If I've had time to implement what I've discovered, Harry may carry my protection. Albus knows of this research but not its full extent or implications. Harry, my son, my love, be brave, be kind, and be true to yourself. You are destined for greatness not because of prophecy, but because of the strength I see in your heart. This concludes my will. So mote it be. As his mother's voice faded, Harry could no longer hold back his tears. They streamed silently down his face as he absorbed her words, her love, her warnings, her faith in him. The room remained silent for several long moments, everyone present seemingly affected by what they'd heard. Finally, Amelia Bones cleared her throat and spoke in an official tone that didn't quite mask her anger. As we can clearly see, multiple violations of the Potter's expressed wishes occurred. Their son was placed with explicitly prohibited guardians, their wills were illegally sealed, and according to medical evidence from the Goblins, numerous magical compulsions were placed on the heir against his parents' explicit instructions. She turned to Harry. Mr. Potter, as the wronged party and heir to House Potter, you have the right to pursue legal action against those responsible. Harry wiped at his tears, trying to compose himself. Dumbledore, he said quietly. It was all Dumbledore, wasn't it? It appears so, Ragnarok confirmed. But the full extent of his manipulations may be even greater than we initially believed. Black Claw. One of the Goblin officials at the table straightened. We've completed the preliminary audit of the Potter accounts as ordered, Director. There are discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Amelia asked sharply. Blackclaw consulted a ledger before him. Since November 1981, approximately 50,000 galleons have been withdrawn from the Potter Trust Vault in regular installments of 1,000 galleons per month. Withdrawn by whom? Harry asked. Albus Dumbledore, acting as self-appointed magical guardian, Blackclaw replied. The transfers were directed to two accounts, 500 galleons monthly to Vernon and Petunia Dursley, converted to Muggle currency, and 500 galleons monthly to a vault held by the Order of the Phoenix, an organization controlled by Dumbledore. The room erupted in outrage. Amelia Bones looked livid. The Dursleys were being paid? Quite generously, Blackclaw confirmed. The equivalent of approximately £2,500 sterling per month, far more than would be required for a child's basic needs. Harry felt a surge of anger so intense that several objects on the table began to vibrate. The Dursleys had received a small fortune to care for him, while he'd been stuffed in a cupboard, dressed in rags, and regularly starved. I've seen enough, Amelia declared. As head of the DMLE, I'm officially opening investigations into Albus Dumbledore for multiple violations including illegal seizure of guardianship, will tampering, use of prohibited compulsion charms on a minor, embezzlement of an ancient house's assets, and child endangerment. She turned to Harry. Mr. Potter, according to the wills, your legal guardianship should have gone to Sirius Black. However, there's a complication. Sirius Black is currently in Azkaban prison. What? Harry looked up in shock. My godfather is in prison? For what? Amelia's expression became troubled. He was imprisoned for allegedly betraying your parents to Voldemort and murdering Peter Pettigrew along with 12 Muggles. But the will said Peter was the secret keeper, Harry protested. If they were betrayed, it was Peter who did it, not Sirius. Yes, Amelia agreed grimly. That revelation alone warrants immediate review of his case. Particularly troubling is the fact that there's no record of Sirius Black ever receiving a trial. No trial? One of the wizards at the table spoke up, a distinguished-looking man with dark skin and a deep, reassuring voice. That's unprecedented for a member of an ancient house. Precisely, Lord Shacklebolt, Amelia agreed. As of this moment, I'm ordering a stay of incarceration for Sirius Black and his immediate transfer to a secure medical facility for evaluation and preparation for a proper trial. She turned back to Harry. Until your godfather's situation is resolved, we need to establish temporary guardianship in accordance with your parents' wishes. The Longbottoms are unfortunately unavailable, They were attacked shortly after your parents and have been in St. Mungo's long-term care ward ever since. What about the others on the list? Harry asked. Minerva McGonagall is Dumbledore's deputy headmistress at Hogwarts, Amelia explained. Given Dumbledore's involvement, there may be a conflict of interest. That leaves me as the fourth option. She looked slightly uncomfortable. I want to be clear, Mr. Potter. I'm willing to honor your parents' wishes, but my position at the DMLE involves considerable demands on my time. There is another option, Ragnarok interjected. Under the Treaty of 1612, Gringotts can claim protective custody of magical children in cases of proven abuse and exploitation, especially when the child's assets are held within our vaults. This would provide Mr. Potter with immediate protection while legal matters are resolved. Harry looked between them uncertainly. Amelia Bones seemed kind but intimidating, and he knew nothing about her beyond her official position. The Goblins, despite their fearsome appearance, had treated him with more care and respect than any adults in his memory. Could I stay here? He asked tentatively. Just until my godfather's situation is sorted out. Griphook, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, spoke up. The Potter family has maintained a Vault Guardian relationship with Gringotts for centuries. I would be honored to serve as young Potter's primary guardian within the nation. Ragnarok nodded approvingly. Griphook has shown exceptional insight in this matter already. I approve the assignment. Amelia considered this. It would provide a neutral ground, away from Dumbledore's influence, while we investigate and prepare legal proceedings. She looked at Harry. Would that arrangement be acceptable to you, Mr. Potter? Harry nodded, feeling a surprising sense of security at the thought of remaining with Griphook and the Goblins who had already helped him so much. Very well, Amelia declared. I'll file the necessary paperwork establishing temporary shared guardianship between Gringotts, represented by Griphook, and the DMLE, represented by myself. This dual arrangement will provide maximum legal protection. There is one more matter, Blackclaw noted, consulting his ledger again. Several Potter family heirlooms are missing from the vault inventory, including an invisibility cloak of particular significance and several books from the Potter family library. Records indicate they were removed by Albus Dumbledore in December 1981. Add theft of house artifacts to the charges, Amelia said grimly. We'll need a complete list of missing items. The meeting continued for another hour, with detailed discussions of financial restitution, legal procedures, and security arrangements. Throughout it all, Harry struggled to process everything he was learning, about his parents, his godfather, his inheritance, and the extent of Dumbledore's betrayal. Finally, Ragnarok called the meeting to a close. We've established the immediate course of action. Lord Potter will remain under Gringotts' protection while legal proceedings advance. Madam Bones will handle the ministry aspects, including the review of Sirius Black's case. Our financial team will continue the full audit of the Potter accounts. As the various officials began to disperse, Amelia approached Harry. I knew your parents well, Mr. Potter. They were exceptional people, brave, brilliant, and kind. I want you to know that I'm committed to seeing justice done on their behalf, and yours. Harry managed a small smile. Thank you, Madam Bones. I'd like to hear more about them sometime, if that's all right. I'd be happy to share my memories, she promised. And once we've secured Sirius Black's release, you'll have someone who knew them even better. After she departed, Harry turned to Griphook. What happens now? Now, the Goblin replied with a hint of a smile, your education begins. In the following days, Harry settled into a routine at Gringotts that was unlike anything he'd experienced before. He had comfortable quarters, regular meals, and for the first time in his life, adults who actually seemed interested in his well-being and development. Griphook had arranged a comprehensive program to help Harry understand both his heritage and his magic. Mornings were devoted to learning about the Potter family history, wizarding customs, and the responsibilities of an heir to an ancient house. Afternoons focused on the basics of magical theory and controlled exercises to help Harry connect with his newly unbound magic. Magic is intention and will given form, explained Silverthread, an elderly goblin who specialized in teaching young goblins how to manage their innate magic. Wizards typically rely on wands to focus and direct their power, but the magic itself comes from within. They sat in a circular chamber with smooth stone walls etched with runes. Harry sat cross-legged on a cushion, eyes closed, trying to sense the magic that Griphook insisted was now flowing freely through him. "I can feel something," Harry said hesitantly. "Like a warm current inside me." "Good," Silverthread approved. "Now, imagine that warmth gathering in your palm. Don't try to push or force it, simply invite it to move where you wish." Harry concentrated, picturing the energy flowing down his arm to pool in his cupped palm. To his surprise, he felt a tingling sensation followed by warmth. "Open your eyes," Silverthread instructed. Harry did, and gasped. A small ball of golden light hovered just above his palm, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I did it," he exclaimed, then promptly lost concentration. The light winked out. "Impressive for a first attempt," Silverthread commented. "Most wizard children, even without bindings, can't manage wandless light creation until much older." Harry's magical education was complemented by regular visits from Amelia Bones, who brought updates on the legal proceedings as well as stories about his parents. "Your father was one of our most promising young aurors," she told Harry over tea in his quarters. "Exceptionally talented in transfiguration and dueling. And your mother was brilliantly innovative, she created several charms and potions modifications that we still use in the department today." Harry soaked up these details like a sponge, building a mental picture of James and Lily Potter that went far beyond the lies he'd been told by the Dursleys. The most significant development came a week after Harry's arrival at Gringotts, when Amelia arrived looking both pleased and disturbed. "We've secured Sirius Black's release from Azkaban," she announced. "The evidence in your parents' will, combined with a review of the original case files, or rather, the suspicious lack of proper files, was enough to convince the Wizengamot to order his immediate transfer to St. Mungo's." "That's wonderful!" Harry exclaimed. "When can I meet him?" Amelia's expression sobered. "Not immediately, I'm afraid. Azkaban is a terrible place, Harry. It's guarded by creatures called Dementors that feed on happy memories and emotions. Sirius has been exposed to them for nearly 3 years. The healers say he'll need at least a month of intensive treatment before he's stable enough for visitors." Harry's excitement dimmed. "But he will get better, right?" "The healers are cautiously optimistic," Amelia assured him. "Sirius was always remarkably strong-willed. And having a purpose, reuniting with you, seems to be giving him something to fight for." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. Dumbledore has been making moves to regain control of your guardianship. He's arguing that the goblin protection is inappropriate, and that your parents' will doesn't reflect their true intentions given the extraordinary circumstances of Voldemort's attack." Harry felt a chill. Can he do that? Go against their will like that? "He's trying," Amelia said grimly. "He has considerable support in the Wizengamot. However, we have one significant advantage: you're old enough to have your preferences considered in guardianship hearings." "I don't want to be anywhere near him," Harry stated firmly. "Not after what he did to me." "And your wishes will be given serious weight," Amelia assured him. "Particularly since we can now prove the compulsion charms and financial improprieties. But Dumbledore is resourceful. He's already spinning a narrative that everything he did was for your protection." "Protection?" Harry repeated incredulously. "Leaving me with people who hated me? Stealing my family's money? Putting spells on me to control me? What kind of protection is that?" "That's exactly the question I've been asking," Amelia agreed. "Unfortunately, Dumbledore has spent decades building an image as the wise, benevolent leader of the light. Many people find it difficult to believe he could act unethically, even when presented with evidence. Griphook, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Then perhaps it's time to make that evidence public. The wizarding world should know how their leader of the light treats orphan children. Amelia looked thoughtful. A strategic release of information could shift public opinion. But we'd need to be careful about how much we reveal and through which channels. The Daily Prophet is notoriously susceptible to influence. What about the unsealed wills? Harry suggested. Couldn't people just read what my parents said about Dumbledore themselves? That's actually quite brilliant, Amelia said, looking impressed. Wills of ancient houses are considered public record once unsealed and executed. There would be no legal impediment to their publication. The Quibbler, Griphook suggested unexpectedly. An unusual publication, but one with a reputation for printing unpopular truths. And its editor, Xenophilius Lovegood, has no particular loyalty to Dumbledore. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Goblins read the Quibbler. We monitor all wizarding publications, Griphook replied with dignity. Knowledge is valuable currency. I'll reach out to Lovegood, Amelia decided. A special edition featuring the unedited wills could be quite powerful. As they discussed strategy, Harry found himself both grateful for their protection and unsettled by the need for it. He was only 4 years old, yet already at the center of political maneuverings he barely understood. I just want to be normal, he said suddenly, interrupting their planning. Why does Dumbledore care so much about controlling me? Amelia and Griphook exchanged glances. There are theories, Amelia said carefully. Your mother mentioned a prophecy in her will. Dumbledore has claimed for years that Voldemort isn't truly gone, despite his apparent defeat the night your parents died. Your mother's research on these Horcruxes supports that theory, Griphook added. If Voldemort found ways to anchor his soul to the physical world, he could potentially return someday. And Dumbledore thinks I have to fight him? Harry asked incredulously. I'm 4. Which is precisely why his actions are so disturbing, Amelia said. What kind of man places such a burden on a child, then systematically works to control that child's development through magical and financial manipulation? A man who values his grand plans above individual lives, Griphook answered grimly. A man who sees people as pieces on a chessboard rather than beings with their own wills and rights. Harry shivered, despite the warmth of the room. The idea that his entire life had been manipulated as part of someone else's scheme was profoundly disturbing. I won't be his pawn, he said quietly, but with surprising determination for a 4-year-old. Whatever he planned for me, I won't do it his way. Amelia smiled approvingly. That's the spirit, Harry. And you won't have to face him alone. You have allies now, both in Gringotts and at the Ministry. Speaking of allies, Griphook interjected, the audit team has made another discovery that might interest you. It seems your mother established several connections with magical families for your future benefit, including fosterage arrangements with the Longbottom, Bones, and Greengrass families. Harry looked to Amelia questioningly. Fosterage is an old magical tradition, she explained. Magical children would spend time with allied families to broaden their education and strengthen inter-family bonds. According to these agreements, you were meant to have regular contact with several families as you grew up, not be isolated with muggles who despised magic. So I could have had friends? Harry asked, the concept almost foreign to him after years of Dudley chasing away anyone who might have befriended him. You were meant to, Amelia confirmed sadly. My niece Susan is just a few months older than you. The Longbottom boy, Neville, shares your exact birthday. The Greengrass daughters are close to your age as well. Another piece of normal childhood Dumbledore had stolen from him. Harry felt a renewed surge of anger, and the teacup on the table before him cracked suddenly. Sorry, he mumbled, embarrassed by the loss of control. No need for apologies, Griphook said. Your magic is responding to your emotions. That's natural, especially since the bindings were removed so recently. Control will come with practice. Which reminds me, Amelia said, reaching into her robes. I brought you something that might help. She withdrew a slender box and presented it to Harry. This belonged to your father. I managed to retrieve it from the Potter cottage in Godric's Hollow. Harry opened the box with trembling hands to find a wand, 11 inches of mahogany, polished to a warm glow. Your father's wand, Amelia explained. Normally, a wizard should have their own wand, matched specifically to them. But having your father's wand might help you begin to channel your magic more controllably until you're old enough to visit Ollivander's shop. And it's a tangible connection to your heritage, Griphook added. Family wands often respond adequately to heirs, even if not perfectly matched. Harry picked up the wand reverently, feeling an immediate warm tingling in his fingers. Not a perfect match, perhaps, but there was definitely a connection. Thank you, he whispered, blinking back tears. Amelia smiled gently. Your father would have wanted you to have it. Now, shall we try a simple spell? The publication of James and Lily Potter's wills in a special edition of the Quibbler created exactly the uproar they had hoped for. Within days, the wizarding public was buzzing with outrage over Dumbledore's actions. The explicit prohibition against placing Harry with the Dursleys, the warning about Dumbledore's controlling tendencies, and the revelation that Sirius Black had been wrongfully imprisoned, all directly contradicting the official narrative Dumbledore had established, shocked magical Britain to its core. Dumbledore found himself facing uncomfortable questions not just from the public and press, but from within his own circle of influence. The Hogwarts Board of Governors called an emergency meeting. The International Confederation of Wizards requested a formal explanation. Even the Order of the Phoenix members who had trusted him implicitly began to wonder what else he might have concealed. The backlash forced Dumbledore to respond publicly. In a carefully worded statement to the Daily Prophet, he expressed deep regret for any misunderstanding regarding his intentions, while insisting that all his actions had been motivated by a desire to keep Harry safe from persistent threats that the general public remained unaware of. The boy's safety was and remains my paramount concern, he claimed. The blood wards established through his mother's sacrifice provided protection that no other arrangement could match. While I respect James and Lily's wishes, I made the difficult decision to prioritize Harry's survival over their preferences regarding his upbringing. The statement failed to address the financial irregularities, the illegal compulsion charms, or the sealing of the wills against procedure. It also conveniently ignored the fact that Lily Potter had explicitly rejected any guardianship role for Dumbledore in her will. Classic misdirection, Amelia commented when she brought a copy of the paper to Harry's quarters. He's acknowledging just enough to appear contrite while still justifying his actions and avoiding the most serious accusations. Harry, who was practicing basic charms with his father's wand under Silverthread's guidance, looked up at her arrival. Does that mean he's giving up? Hardly, Amelia replied, settling into a chair. Dumbledore doesn't give up, he regroups. He's already scheduled a special session of the Wisengamot to address your guardianship. But the wills are being challenged on technical grounds, she explained. He's arguing that they weren't properly witnessed in wartime conditions, and that your parents couldn't have anticipated the specific circumstances of their deaths. Harry's frustration must have shown on his face, because Silverthread paused the lesson. Perhaps we should take a break. Young Potter has been working diligently all morning. As the elderly goblin departed, Griphook entered, carrying a thick folder. The complete audit results, he announced, setting the folder on the table. It's worse than we thought. Amelia leaned forward. What have you found? Beyond the regular withdrawals we already identified, there were numerous other irregularities, Griphook explained, opening the folder to reveal meticulously organized parchments covered with figures and notes. Investment directions changed to benefit companies connected to Dumbledore's allies. Certain Potter properties leased at below-market rates to Order of the Phoenix members. And most concerning, evidence that specific family heirlooms were removed from the vaults. The invisibility cloak mentioned in the earlier report? Amelia asked. Yes, but also several books on ancient magic, a set of communication mirrors, and most significantly, the Potter family grimoire. Harry frowned. What's a grimoire? A family magic book, Amelia explained. Ancient houses like the Potters pass down unique magical knowledge through these books. They're typically enchanted to be accessible only to blood members of the family. Then how could Dumbledore take it? Harry asked. That's what concerns us, Griphook replied grimly. He shouldn't have been able to remove it from the vault at all. The fact that he did suggests he found a way to trick the blood recognition wards, a serious breach of magical security. Amelia's expression darkened. Add magical theft to the charges. And we should accelerate the security review of the Potter properties. If he could breach the vault protections, we can't assume the houses are secure either. As they discussed the legal implications, Harry found himself struggling to understand why anyone would go to such lengths to control him and his family's resources. He was just a child, important to those who loved him, certainly, but hardly the center of the wizarding world. Unless. It's because of how Voldemort disappeared, isn't it? He asked suddenly, interrupting the adults' conversation. Everyone thinks I did something special that night. Amelia looked at him with surprise. That's perceptive, Harry. Yes, you're known throughout our world as the boy who lived, the only person ever to survive the killing curse. Voldemort attacked your family, killed your parents, and then tried to kill you, but somehow, the curse rebounded and struck him instead. But I was just a baby, Harry protested. I couldn't have done anything special. Your mother mentioned protection rituals in her will, Griphook reminded him. It's possible she found a way to shield you, perhaps at the cost of her own life. That would align with the magical residue found in Godric's Hollow, Amelia agreed. There were traces of sacrificial magic, ancient, powerful protections that operate on principles of love and willing sacrifice. So it wasn't me at all, Harry said, feeling oddly relieved. It was my mum. Most likely, Amelia confirmed. Though that doesn't explain why Dumbledore has been so fixated on controlling your development. There must be something more, something he knows but hasn't shared. The prophecy, Harry suggested. The one my mum mentioned. Amelia nodded slowly. Dumbledore does have access to all prophecies made in Britain through his position at Hogwarts. If there was a prophecy about you and Voldemort, it would explain his obsessive interference, Griphook finished. He believes the boy has some future role to play against the Dark Lord. But Voldemort's gone, Harry said. Is he? Griphook countered. Your mothers will mention Horcruxes, dark magic designed to prevent true death. If Voldemort created such anchors, he may be diminished but not destroyed. The idea that the dark wizard who murdered his parents might still exist in some form sent a chill through Harry. So Dumbledore thinks I have to fight him someday. That's why he wanted to control me. It would explain his actions, Amelia acknowledged. But even if such a prophecy exists, it doesn't justify what he did to you. Prophecies are notoriously ambiguous, and many never come to pass at all. To manipulate a child's entire life based on a potential future threat. It's unconscionable, Griphook stated flatly. And illegal under both wizarding and goblin law. Harry sat quietly for a moment, absorbing this information. Then, with a determination that surprised the adults, he said, I want to see the prophecy. If it's about me, I have a right to know what it says. Amelia looked taken aback by his assertiveness but nodded slowly. Legally, you do have that right. Prophecies can only be accessed by those they concern. But the Hall of Prophecy is in the Department of Mysteries, one of the most secure locations in the Ministry. Can you arrange it? Harry pressed. Please. I need to understand why he did all this. I'll see what can be done, Amelia promised after a moment's consideration. Though it may take time to arrange proper security. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a goblin messenger, who handed Griphook a sealed note. The goblin's eyes widened slightly as he read it. It seems, he said, looking up, that we have an unexpected visitor requesting an audience with young Potter. Minerva McGonagall has arrived at Gringotts. Minerva McGonagall had always prided herself on her composure, but today it took all her considerable self-control to maintain her dignity as she was escorted through the depths of Gringotts. The revelation of Albus's actions regarding the Potter boy had shaken her to her core. For years, she had trusted his judgment implicitly, even when she'd had misgivings about leaving Harry with those muggles. Now, faced with irrefutable evidence of manipulation and deceit, she found herself questioning everything. The Goblin guide stopped before an ornate door and announced her presence. After a brief pause, the door swung open to reveal a surprisingly comfortable chamber. Her eyes immediately found the small boy seated in a chair that seemed sized specifically for him, a goblin standing protectively at his side. "Harry," she breathed, unable to suppress a gasp. He looked so much like James, the same unruly black hair and facial structure, but with Lily's vivid green eyes watching her warily. "Professor McGonagall," Amelia Bones greeted her formally, rising from her own seat. "This is unexpected." "Madam Bones," Minerva acknowledged with a nod. "I apologize for the intrusion, but after reading the wills." She paused, emotion threatening to overcome her composure. "I needed to see him for myself. To see that he's well." Harry continued to watch her cautiously. "You knew my parents too?" "Very well indeed," Minerva confirmed, her Scottish accent thickening slightly with emotion. "I was their head of house at Hogwarts, and later, a fellow member of the Order of the Phoenix. And named as a potential guardian in our wills," Harry noted, surprising her with his directness. "But you work for Dumbledore." The blunt statement caught her off guard. Yes, I am deputy headmistress at Hogwarts." "Then why are you here?" The question came not from Harry but from the goblin beside him, Griphook, if she recalled correctly from her briefing with the entrance guards. "Because I failed him," Minerva answered honestly, her voice catching. "I failed James and Lily. I had reservations when Albus left Harry with those muggles. I observed them for a day before he arrived, and I told Albus they were the worst sort of muggles imaginable. But I deferred to his judgment, as I have so many times before." She turned to Harry directly. "I should have checked on you. I should have insisted on regular visits at the very least. For that failure, I can only offer my profound apologies." Harry seemed taken aback by her sincerity. "You didn't know about the compulsion charms?" "No," Minerva stated firmly. "Had I known of such violations, I would have objected strenuously. Magical compulsions on a child are considered dark magic in most contexts." Her lips thinned in anger. "As for the financial irregularities and the sealing of the wills, I was completely unaware." Amelia studied her carefully. "Yet you've come alone, without Dumbledore's knowledge, I presume." "Albus believes I'm visiting my brother in Caithness," Minerva confirmed. "After reading the wills in the Quibbler, I found I could no longer simply accept his explanations. Not without seeing Harry for myself." "A wise decision," Griphook commented, his tone slightly less hostile now. "Blind loyalty is seldom rewarded with truth." Minerva flinched at the rebuke but couldn't deny its accuracy. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to an empty chair. "There's much I'd like to discuss, if you're willing." At Harry's tentative nod, she settled into the chair, her posture still rigidly proper despite her emotional turmoil. "First, I want to assure you that I had no knowledge of your living conditions with the Dursleys beyond my initial observations. Albus insisted that regular wizarding contact would disrupt the blood wards and potentially expose your location to remaining Death Eaters. I accepted this explanation, though I argued for at least annual welfare checks." "And did these checks occur?" Amelia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Albus assured me they did, but..." Minerva's expression faltered. "In light of recent revelations, I must assume those assurances were false." Harry's face remained neutral, but Minerva could see hurt in his eyes, hurt she and others had allowed through their inaction. "What does Dumbledore want with me?" he asked directly. "Why go to all this trouble to control me?" Minerva hesitated, weighing her response carefully. I cannot speak to his deepest motivations with certainty. What I do know is that he believes you know who will return someday, and that you are somehow key to his final defeat. Because of a prophecy? Harry pressed. Minerva's surprise must have shown on her face, because Harry continued, my mum mentioned it in her will. There's a prophecy about me and Voldemort, isn't there? Flinching slightly at the name, Minerva nodded reluctantly. Yes, though I don't know its exact contents. Albus has never shared that information, even with the Order members. I know only that a prophecy was made shortly before your birth, and that you know who learned at least part of it, which is why he targeted your family specifically. So all of this, the compulsions, leaving me with abusive relatives, stealing from my vaults, was because of a prophecy that might not even come true. Harry's voice rose slightly, and several objects in the room trembled in response to his agitation. Prophecies from true seers do come true, Minerva clarified gently, though often not in the ways we expect. But no, Harry. Even if Albus believed the prophecy was absolute, nothing justifies the methods he employed. Her voice hardened with genuine anger. Nothing. The sincerity in her tone seemed to reach Harry, and the trembling object stilled as he regained control. What will you do now? He asked. Will you tell Dumbledore you've seen me? No, Minerva stated firmly. My loyalty is not blind, despite appearances to the contrary. I came here to see you, to assess your well-being for myself, and to offer what assistance I can in securing your proper care, as I should have done 3 years ago. She turned to Amelia. I understand Sirius is at St. Mungo's. Amelia nodded. Under guard and receiving treatment. The healers are cautiously optimistic about his recovery. Good. Minerva reached into her robes and withdrew a small package wrapped in tartan cloth. I brought something for you, Harry. It belonged to your father. Harry accepted the package curiously and unwrapped it to reveal a small golden ball with delicate silver wings that fluttered weakly. A snitch, Minerva explained, seeing his confusion. From your father's final Quidditch match at Hogwarts. He was an exceptional player, a chaser, primarily, though he could play seeker when needed. She smiled at the memory. He caught this snitch to win the House Cup in his 7th year. Afterward, he enchanted it to open at his touch, or his heirs, to hold small keepsakes. Harry examined the golden ball with wonder, then looked up at her questioningly. Hold it in your palm and whisper, I solemnly swear I am up to no good, Minerva instructed, a hint of amusement breaking through her serious demeanor. Harry did as directed, and the snitches seemed split open to reveal a tiny compartment containing a folded scrap of parchment. He carefully removed it and unfolded it to find a moving wizard photograph of a young couple dancing beneath autumn leaves, laughing as they spun. Your parents, Minerva said softly, at the Halloween feast in their 7th year. Just after they'd officially begun dating. Harry stared at the image, transfixed. His father, tall and carefree, spinning his mother, whose red hair flew out around her as she laughed. They looked so young, so happy, so alive. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Minerva nodded, not trusting herself to speak as she watched the orphaned boy clutch this small connection to his lost parents. After allowing Harry a moment with the photograph, Amelia gently steered the conversation back to practical matters. Professor McGonagall, given your position as deputy headmistress, you have access to Hogwarts records that could be valuable to our investigation. Understanding dawned in Minerva's eyes. The Book of Magical Children. You think Albus may have interfered with other children? It's a possibility we can't dismiss, Amelia confirmed. Particularly for orphans or muggleborns without established connections in the wizarding world. Minerva's expression hardened. I'll review the records immediately. If there are anomalies in the registry or admission letters, I'll find them. And there's the matter of the missing Potter heirlooms, Grip Hook added. Several items were removed from the vaults by Dumbledore, including an invisibility cloak of unusual quality. I've seen James's cloak, Minerva confirmed. Albus borrowed it shortly before. She hesitated, glancing at Harry, before that Halloween. I wasn't aware he'd kept it afterward. He did more than keep it, Griphook said grimly. He removed it from the Potter vault after the wills were sealed, along with several other significant items. Minerva's nostrils flared in anger. I'll discreetly search his office. Some of these items may be there. Be careful, Amelia warned. Albus must not suspect your change of allegiance. Your position at Hogwarts could be invaluable if you can maintain his trust. I've been playing wizard's chess with Albus for decades, Minerva replied with Scottish determination. I know how to mask my moves. As the adults continued strategizing, Harry found himself studying the photograph again. His parents looked barely older than teenagers, yet within a few years of this moment, they would be married, have him, and then die protecting him. And now, years after their deaths, the truth of their lives and their wishes for him was finally coming to light. The thought gave him a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Professor, he said suddenly, looking up from the photograph. What were they like? At school, I mean. Minerva's stern features softened. Your father was brilliant but mischievous, always in trouble, yet somehow maintaining top marks in Transfiguration. He and his friends called themselves the Marauders and pulled the most elaborate pranks imaginable. She shook her head, but Harry could see the fondness in her expression. Your mother was equally brilliant, but more rule-abiding, at least until her later years. She had a particular gift for charms and potions, and a fierce sense of justice. Did they fight a lot? Before they started dating? Harry asked, curious about how his seemingly opposite parents had come together. Minerva actually chuckled. Oh my, yes. Your mother thought your father an arrogant troublemaker for years, and she wasn't entirely wrong. James had to do quite a bit of maturing before Lily would give him a chance. Her eyes twinkled. But once they finally came together in 7th year, they were inseparable. I've rarely seen a couple so perfectly matched, despite their different personalities. Harry absorbed this eagerly, adding each detail to his developing picture of James and Lily Potter. Not perfect people, but real ones, with flaws and strengths, who had grown and changed and loved each other. It made their sacrifice for him feel even more meaningful somehow. I wish I could remember them, he said softly. You may have memories buried deeper than you realize, Minerva suggested gently. There are magical methods that might help recover early childhood memories, once you're a bit older and your mind is more developed. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with Minerva sharing stories about Harry's parents and agreeing to various actions to help secure his future. By the time she prepared to leave, Harry felt he had gained not just an ally but a genuine connection to his past. I shall visit again when I can do so without arousing suspicion, Minerva promised, rising from her chair. In the meantime, I'll begin quietly investigating the matters we've discussed. She hesitated, then added with unexpected emotion, I want you to know, Harry, that your parents would be enormously proud of how you're handling all of this. At your age, to show such resilience and clarity of thought, it's extraordinary. Harry felt a warm glow at her words. Thank you for coming, Professor. And for telling me about them. As Minerva departed, escorted by a goblin guard, Amelia turned to Harry with an assessing look. You've made quite an impression on her. Minerva McGonagall doesn't give praise lightly. Harry shrugged, embarrassed. I just want to know the truth. About everything. A worthy goal, Griphook commented. Though truth often brings pain alongside clarity. I know, Harry said, carefully returning the photograph to the snitch's compartment and whispering, mischief managed, as Minerva had instructed. The golden ball sealed itself with a soft click. But I've spent my whole life being lied to. Even if the truth hurts, at least it's real. Griphook nodded approvingly. Wise words for one so young. Now, I believe we've had enough serious discussion for one day. Perhaps we should continue your magical education. Silverthread mentioned you were making excellent progress with basic charms. Harry brightened at the suggestion. Each new spell he learned felt like reclaiming a piece of his birthright, the magical heritage Dumbledore had tried to suppress. "Can we try the levitation charm again?" he asked eagerly. "I almost had it yesterday." As they resumed his lessons, Harry felt a new sense of purpose forming within him. He would learn everything he could about magic, about his family, about the wizarding world that should have been his home. And someday, when he faced Dumbledore, as he was increasingly certain he would do so not as the malleable pawn the old wizard had tried to create, but as Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter. And he would be ready. In the headmaster's office at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Albus Dumbledore sat alone, contemplating the rapidly unraveling plans of a lifetime. The trinkets that had once monitored Harry Potter lay shattered on his desk, beyond magical repair. The political capital he'd spent decades accumulating was eroding daily as more details of his actions came to light. Even his most loyal supporters were beginning to question his methods, if not his intentions. Yet Albus could not bring himself to regret his decisions. They couldn't understand, the bigger picture. The prophecy made it clear, Harry Potter was destined to face Voldemort again. The boy needed to be shaped, molded into someone who would make the right choices when the time came. Someone who would be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. The compulsion charms had been regrettable but necessary, subtle influences to ensure Harry developed the proper humility, the right moral framework, the willingness to put others before himself. The financial arrangements with the Dursleys had been meant to secure their cooperation, though it seemed they had failed to provide even basic care despite the generous stipend. Perhaps that had been a miscalculation. But the blood wards had been essential, the only protection strong enough to shield the boy from Voldemort's remaining followers. Now those protections were gone, shattered along with the compulsion charms in that extraordinary burst of accidental magic. Harry was beyond his reach, sheltered by goblins who had no understanding of the greater dangers that lay ahead. Albus sighed heavily, feeling every one of his considerable years. Time was running short. He needed to regain control of Harry's development before the boy was too deeply influenced by those who didn't understand the sacrifices that would eventually be required. The special Wizengamot session he'd called was his best hope. Despite the evidence against him, he still commanded significant respect in that chamber. If he could convince enough members that his actions, while perhaps overreaching, had been motivated by genuine concern for both Harry and Wizarding Britain. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, straightening in his chair and composing his features into their customary benign expression. Severus Snape entered, his sallow face even more dour than usual. "You summoned me, headmaster." "Ah, Severus, yes." Albus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming. I find myself in need of your particular skills." Snape settled into the chair, his dark eyes unreadable. "I presume this concerns Potter." "Indeed." Albus studied his potions master carefully. "The situation has become complicated. The boy is currently beyond my influence, surrounded by those who do not understand the importance of his proper development." "You mean those who object to your placing compulsion charms on a toddler," Snape replied dryly. "A practice that, I hardly need remind you, borders on the darkest arts." Albus frowned slightly. "I had not expected such judgment from you, Severus." The charms were minimal, mere nudges to ensure his character developed appropriately. 47 distinct magical bindings is hardly minimal, Snape countered. Even the Dark Lord was more selective in his mental manipulations. "You've been reading the Quibbler, I see. Along with the rest of Wizarding Britain." Snape's lip curled slightly. "Lilies will made for illuminating reading." At the mention of Lily Potter, Albus sensed an opening. "That is partly why I've called you here. You promised to help protect her son, did you not?" "I did," Snape acknowledged stiffly. "Though I fail to see how compulsion charms and financial exploitation qualify as protection." "The bigger picture, Severus," Albus urged. You know as well as I do that Voldemort will return. When he does, Harry must be prepared to face him, prepared in very specific ways. Snape's eyes narrowed. What aren't you telling me, Albus? What specific preparation could possibly justify such methods with a child? Albus hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Severus was valuable, but his lingering attachment to Lily Potter made his loyalty in this specific matter uncertain. The prophecy is more complex than you know, he finally said. Harry's connection to Voldemort runs deeper than anyone suspects. When the time comes, certain sacrifices may be necessary. Understanding dawned in Snape's dark eyes, followed by something Albus rarely saw there, genuine horror. You've been raising him like a pig for slaughter, he whispered. All these years. I've been ensuring he develops the strength of character to do what must be done, Albus corrected firmly. The compulsion charms were designed to instill humility, selflessness, and courage, qualities he will need. By placing him with abusive relatives and binding his magic. Snape's voice was dangerously quiet. How exactly does traumatizing a child prepare him for anything but further trauma? Adversity builds character, Severus. You of all people should understand that. Albus sighed heavily. But we're straying from the purpose of this conversation. I need your assistance. To do what, precisely? To help me regain influence over Harry's development. The goblins have him now, but they cannot keep him indefinitely. Eventually, a wizarding guardian will be appointed. Sirius Black has been released from Azkaban, Snape pointed out, obvious distaste in his tone. As the boy's godfather, he has prior claim. Sirius is currently in no condition to assume guardianship, Albus countered. And by the time he recovers, I intend to have alternatives in place. Which is where you come in. Snape raised an eyebrow. I fail to see how I could possibly assist in this matter. You were named in Lily's will, Albus reminded him. She left you her forgiveness and her potions journals. That creates a connection, a thin one, admittedly, but one we might leverage. If you were to petition for visitation rights based on Lily's expressed wishes. You want me to use Lily's last wishes to help you regain control over her son? Snape's voice was incredulous. The same son you admitted you're preparing for some kind of sacrifice? I want you to help ensure that when Voldemort returns, Harry will be properly prepared to face him, Albus corrected. Without the right guidance, he will be vulnerable, not just to Voldemort, but to those who would use him for their own purposes. As opposed to being used for your purposes. Snape stood abruptly. I promise to protect Lily's son. From my perspective, he currently needs protection from you. Albus felt a rare flash of genuine anger. Be very careful, Severus. Your position here, your freedom, depends on my continued goodwill. Are you threatening me, headmaster? Snape's voice was dangerously soft. Merely reminding you of our arrangement. Albus maintained steady eye contact. Your past actions could still result in an extended stay in Azkaban, should they become widely known. For a long moment, the two wizards stared at each other in tense silence. Then, surprisingly, Snape's lips curved into a thin smile. You're desperate, he observed. To resort to such obvious threats. The great Albus Dumbledore, reduced to blackmail when his manipulations are exposed. This is not a game, Severus. The fate of our world may depend on Harry Potter being properly prepared. Perhaps, Snape conceded. But I find myself questioning your definition of properly prepared. And more importantly, questioning whether you are the appropriate person to make such determinations. With that, he turned toward the door. Think carefully about your next actions, Severus, Albus called after him. There is too much at stake for personal feelings to interfere. Snape paused at the threshold. Indeed. Which is why I shall do exactly as Lily asked of me in her will, protect her son. Good evening, headmaster. The door closed behind him with a decisive click, leaving Albus alone with the uncomfortable realization that yet another piece had slipped from his control. The game was growing more complex by the day. But he had been playing it longer than anyone, and he still had moves they couldn't anticipate. Harry Potter would fulfill his destiny, one way or another. 3 weeks after his arrival at Gringotts, Harry stood nervously beside Griphook in a secure chamber deep within the Department of Mysteries. Around them, towering shelves filled with glowing orbs stretched into the dimness, the Hall of Prophecy, where the mysteries of past, present, and future were stored in physical form. "Stay close," Amelia instructed, leading the small party down a narrow aisle. 2 unspeakables, Department of Mysteries employees bound by magical oaths of secrecy, walked ahead and behind them, their grey robes and obscured faces adding to the eerie atmosphere. "How will we find the right one?" Harry asked quietly. "There must be thousands. The hall is organized chronologically and alphabetically," explained the unspeakable ahead of them, voice magically modified to prevent identification. "We're looking for a prophecy made to Albus Dumbledore by Sybil Trelawney in early 1980. They continued deeper into the vast chamber, the orbs casting ghostly blue light across their faces. Finally, they stopped before a specific shelf, where a single orb glowed slightly brighter than those around it. "Here," the unspeakable said, pointing but not touching. "This is the prophecy concerning Harry Potter and the Dark Lord." Harry stepped forward hesitantly, looking at the small label beneath the orb, SPT to APWBD, Dark Lord and Harry Potter. "Only those named in a prophecy can remove it from the shelf," Amelia explained gently. "It has to be you, Harry." Taking a deep breath, Harry reached up and carefully lifted the orb from its stand. Immediately, it grew warmer in his hands, the mist inside swirling more actively. "Now what?" he asked. "Break it," the unspeakable instructed. "Or place it against your forehead. Either way will release the prophecy for all present to hear." Harry opted to hold it to his forehead, not wanting to risk dropping and shattering it. The moment the glass touched his skin, a harsh, raspy voice filled the chamber, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies." The voice faded, leaving a profound silence. Harry lowered the orb, his hands trembling slightly. "That's it?" he finally asked. "That's why Dumbledore did all this? Because of that?" Amelia looked troubled. "It would seem so. Though prophecies are notoriously open to interpretation. Either must die at the hand of the other," Griphook quoted grimly. "Dumbledore believes you must eventually face Voldemort in a final confrontation." "But I'm for." Harry protested again. "And Voldemort's supposed to be gone anyway. The prophecy says, neither can live while the other survives," the lead unspeakable noted. "If the Dark Lord truly created Horcruxes as Lily Potter suggested in her will, he may indeed still exist in some form. And will continue to exist until all such anchors are destroyed. So Dumbledore was planning to use me to destroy Voldemort permanently," Harry concluded, his young face troubled by concepts no child should have to contemplate. "That's why he wanted to control me." "It appears so," Amelia agreed. "Though his methods remain inexcusable regardless of his motivations." Harry stared at the prophecy orb, still warm in his small hands. "What happens to this now?" "That's up to you," the unspeakable replied. "As one of the subjects, you have the right to destroy it or return it to the shelf. If you destroy it, no one else will ever hear the original prophecy." Harry considered this for a moment, then handed the orb to Griphook. "Destroy it," he decided. "I don't want Dumbledore using it to manipulate anyone else." The goblin looked surprised but pleased by the trust implied in the gesture. With a quick, efficient motion, he dropped the orb to the stone floor, where it shattered into fine crystalline dust, the misty contents dispersing into nothingness. A wise choice, he commented, brushing glass dust from his hands. Prophecies hold power only when people believe in them and act accordingly. But I'll still remember what it said, Harry pointed out. Yes, but now you have knowledge that Dumbledore tried to keep from you, Amelia reminded him. That gives you power he didn't want you to have. As they left the Hall of Prophecy, Harry was quiet, processing what he'd learned. The prophecy itself had been surprisingly vague, full of phrases that could be interpreted multiple ways. Yet Dumbledore had built elaborate plans around it, manipulating Harry's entire life based on his particular understanding of its meaning. What happens next? He asked as they reached the main ministry atrium, preparing to return to Gringotts. The special Wizengamot session is tomorrow, Amelia reminded him. Dumbledore will make his case for regaining your guardianship. We'll present the evidence against him. And you, if you're willing, will have an opportunity to express your preferences. Harry nodded resolutely. I want to be there. I want to face him. Griphook and Amelia exchanged concerned glances. It could be difficult, Amelia warned. Dumbledore is a skilled speaker, and many members of the Wizengamot still respect him deeply despite recent revelations. I know, Harry acknowledged. But I need to do this. I need him to see me, really see me, not just his idea of me. And I need to see him too. Griphook nodded approvingly. Facing one's adversary directly shows courage. The Goblin Nation will stand with you. As will the DMLE, Amelia added firmly. Dumbledore has significantly overreached his authority, regardless of his intentions. It's time he was held accountable. As they prepared to depart, Harry felt a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. Tomorrow would bring his first direct confrontation with the man who had manipulated his life from the shadows. The man who had left him with the Dursleys, bound his magic, and planned his entire future without his knowledge or consent. It was terrifying. But also, in a way he couldn't quite articulate, necessary. For the first time since his accidental magic had shattered Dumbledore's compulsions, Harry felt like he was moving not just away from something, but toward something, toward becoming who he was meant to be, rather than who someone else had tried to shape him into. And that, he decided, was worth facing any challenge, even one as formidable as Albus Dumbledore. Chapter 3, The Confrontation. The ancient chamber of the Wizengamot buzzed with tension. Tiered rows of plum-robed witches and wizards surrounded the central floor in a semicircle, their faces caught between curiosity and concern as they whispered among themselves. The room was filled to capacity, with reporters and spectators crammed into the public gallery, all eager to witness what promised to be the most controversial hearing in decades. Harry Potter sat beside Griphook at a small table on the chamber floor, trying to appear calmer than he felt. Despite wearing his finest robes, deep green with the Potter crest embroidered in gold, and despite weeks of preparation, he couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by the grandeur of the surroundings and the weight of what was about to happen. Remember, Griphook murmured beside him, you have truth on your side. Speak from your heart, but let your mind guide your words. Harry nodded, drawing comfort from the Goblin's steady presence. Across the floor stood another table where Albus Dumbledore waited, resplendent in midnight blue robes spangled with silver stars. Despite the serious charges against him, the old wizard maintained his characteristic air of serene confidence, occasionally nodding politely to Wizengamot members who caught his eye. He doesn't look worried, Harry whispered to Griphook. Appearances can deceive, the Goblin replied. Notice how his fingers keep returning to his wand, though he never quite touches it. He's unsettled, despite his calm facade. Before Harry could respond, the heavy doors at the back of the chamber swung open. Amelia Bones entered, leading a procession of DMLE officials. Unlike the Wizengamot members, she wore formal red robes that marked her as head of magical law enforcement. All rise for the chief witch, called a court official. The assembly stood as an elderly witch with a monocle and an expression of stern impartiality took her place at the highest seat of the semicircle. Augusta Longbottom, Harry had been told, appointed as interim chief witch after Dumbledore had been required to step down from the position due to the conflict of interest in these proceedings. "Be seated," she commanded in a voice that carried effortlessly through the large chamber. "These extraordinary proceedings of the Wizengamot are now in session. Today we address the matter of guardianship for Harry James Potter, heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter, and the related charges against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore." She surveyed the chamber with a sharp gaze. "Due to the sensitive nature of this case involving a minor, I will remind all present that a modified vow of truth is in effect within these chambers. While not as binding as Veritaserum, this charm will make deliberate falsehoods evident to the court. Additionally, the press is present by special dispensation, with the understanding that their reporting must adhere to strict standards of accuracy." Harry noticed several journalists in the gallery shifting uncomfortably at this reminder. "Madam Bones, as the representative of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, you may present your case," Augusta directed. Amelia rose and moved to the center of the floor, her posture impeccable, her voice clear and strong. "Honored members of the Wizengamot, today we address a case that strikes at the very heart of our legal and ethical traditions. At its core, this matter concerns whether even the most respected members of our society are bound by the same laws that govern us all." She gestured toward Harry. "Before you sits Harry James Potter, orphan son of James and Lily Potter, who sacrificed their lives in the war against he who must not be named. Following their deaths, a series of decisions were made regarding young Mr. Potter's placement, magical guardianship, and family assets, decisions that we now know violated both the express wishes of his parents and numerous laws of magical Britain." Amelia began to methodically outline the evidence: the sealed wills that explicitly prohibited Harry's placement with the Dursleys, the financial transactions from the Potter vaults to both the Dursleys and Dumbledore's organizations, and most damning, the 47 distinct magical compulsions placed on Harry without legal authority. These compulsions, she explained, ranged from emotion-controlling charms designed to suppress confidence and curiosity, to actual bindings on Mr. Potter's magical core that restricted his natural abilities. Such bindings, when applied to a magical child without parental or guardian consent, are classified as Class B restricted magic under the Child Protection Act of 1892. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Harry kept his gaze steady, despite feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Across the floor, Dumbledore remained impassive, though Harry thought he detected a tightening around the old wizard's eyes. "We have submitted documentation from Gringotts ritual healers detailing each compulsion and binding that was removed from Mr. Potter during an emergency purging ritual," Amelia continued. "These documents have been verified by independent experts from St. Mungo's, who confirm both the nature of the spells and the serious potential damage they could have caused had they remained in place throughout Mr. Potter's formative years." She turned to address the Chief Witch directly. "What makes this case particularly disturbing is not just the violations themselves, but the pattern they reveal, a pattern of one individual systematically overriding legal safeguards and parental wishes to maintain complete control over a child's development, finances, and future. This level of interference goes beyond mere overreach, it represents a fundamental challenge to our most basic principles of family autonomy and individual rights." As Amelia concluded her opening statement and returned to her seat, Augusta Longbottom turned her penetrating gaze to Dumbledore. "Professor Dumbledore, you may now present your response." Dumbledore rose with dignified grace, his long beard gleaming silver in the chamber's magical light. When he spoke, his voice was gentle yet carried easily to every corner of the room. "Thank you, Madam Chief Witch, honored members of the Wizengamot. I stand before you today not to deny actions taken, but to explain the extraordinary circumstances that necessitated them." He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. In the chaotic days following the fall of Voldemort, a collective shudder ran through the chamber at the name. Many difficult decisions had to be made quickly, with incomplete information and amid ongoing threats from his supporters. As the appointed magical guardian of many orphan children during that dark time, I was faced with the monumental task of ensuring their safety in a world still fraught with danger. Harry felt a surge of indignation. Dumbledore was speaking as though he'd been officially appointed as guardian, when the evidence clearly showed he had assigned himself that role illegally. In the specific case of young Harry, Dumbledore continued, the threat was exponentially greater. As the only known person to have survived the killing curse, and as the child seemingly responsible for Voldemort's downfall, he became an instant target for numerous Death Eaters seeking revenge. Some of you may recall the tragic fate of the Longbottoms, attacked after Halloween 1981 by those searching for information about their master's defeat. Augusta Longbottom's expression hardened at this reference to her son and daughter-in-law, but she remained professionally neutral in her role as Chief Witch. It was this extraordinary risk that led me to implement extraordinary protections, Dumbledore explained, his tone regretful but unapologetic. The blood wards established through Harry's maternal aunt represented the strongest possible shield against those who wished him harm, protection that could not have been matched by any other arrangement, regardless of what James and Lily might have preferred under normal circumstances. He turned slightly to face Harry directly for the first time. As for the compulsion charms and bindings, I deeply regret any distress they may have caused. They were never intended as permanent restrictions, but rather as temporary safeguards to prevent accidental magical outbursts that might have revealed his location or harmed himself or others while living in a Muggle environment. Had I foreseen the distress they would eventually cause, would have sought alternative methods. Harry stared back at Dumbledore, fighting to keep his expression neutral despite the anger bubbling inside him. The old wizard's explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, but Harry knew from the specific nature of the compulsions, encouraging subservience, discouraging questions, suppressing confidence, that they had been about control, not protection. Regarding the financial arrangements, Dumbledore continued, turning back to address the full Wizengamot, the monthly stipends to the Dursley family were intended to offset the considerable burden of raising an additional child, particularly one who might manifest unpredictable magical abilities. The contributions to the Order of the Phoenix Fund were allocated to maintaining ongoing surveillance and protection measures around Little Whinging, measures that successfully prevented any Death Eater from locating Harry for over 3 years. He concluded with a tone of regretful wisdom, "I do not stand before you claiming perfect judgment. In retrospect, some decisions might have been made differently. But I do ask that you consider the context in which these choices were made, a time of extraordinary danger, with the fate of not just one child but potentially our entire world hanging in the balance." As Dumbledore returned to his seat, the chamber erupted in murmurs. His explanation had been masterfully delivered, acknowledging the facts while reframing them in a light that made his actions seem not just justifiable but almost necessary. "The court will now hear testimony from witnesses," Augusta announced once order had been restored. "Madam Bones, please call your first witness." "The DMLE calls Minerva McGonagall," Amelia stated. A stir ran through the chamber as the Hogwarts deputy headmistress entered through a side door and made her way to the witness chair. Her expression was composed but determined as she took her seat. "Professor McGonagall," Amelia began after the formal oath had been administered, "you were present the night Harry Potter was taken to live with the Dursley family, is that correct?" "I was," Minerva confirmed, her Scottish accent more pronounced than usual, suggesting emotional strain despite her professional demeanor. "Could you describe your observations of the Dursley family prior to Mr. Potter's placement with them?" Minerva's lips thinned with remembered disapproval. "I observed the family throughout the day before Harry's arrival, disguised as a cat via my animagus form. Vernon Dursley was a corpulent, ill-tempered man who shouted at people on his way to work. Their son was already displaying violent tendencies, kicking his mother and screaming for sweets. Petunia Dursley spent much of her day spying on neighbors and gossiping. They appeared to be, as I informed Albus at the time, the worst sort of muggles imaginable." "And you expressed these concerns to Professor Dumbledore directly?" "I did, most emphatically. I told him they were the last people who should be entrusted with a magical child. Yet he proceeded with the placement." "Did he explain his reasoning to you?" Minerva hesitated, glancing briefly toward Dumbledore. "He mentioned blood protections through Lily Potter's sister, but provided no specifics about how such protections would function or why they necessitated full-time residence rather than occasional visits to maintain the wards. When I pressed for details, I was assured that arrangements had been made for Harry's well-being." "Were you aware that Lily and James Potter's wills explicitly prohibited placement with the Dursley family?" "I was not," Minerva stated firmly. Had I known, I would have objected even more strenuously. I was led to believe that the placement was temporary, an emergency measure until more suitable arrangements could be made. Amelia nodded. And were you aware of any monitoring of Harry's condition after his placement? Any welfare checks? Albus assured me that he had methods of monitoring Harry's general health and safety, Minerva replied, her tone growing increasingly disapproving. I requested permission to visit several times over the years but was told that wizard contact might compromise the blood wards. In retrospect, I deeply regret not insisting more forcefully or investigating independently. The questioning continued, with Minerva providing damning testimony about the gradual pattern of secrecy and control Dumbledore had established around all matters relating to Harry. When Dumbledore's turn came to question her, his approach was gentle but pointed. Minerva, my dear colleague, in all our years working together at Hogwarts, have you ever known me to act with malice toward any student? Not with malice, no, she acknowledged. But with an occasional disregard for individual welfare in favor of what you perceive as the greater good. A murmur ran through the chamber at this unexpectedly critical response from someone widely known as one of Dumbledore's most loyal supporters. Would you say that the years following Voldemort's downfall were still dangerous times? Dumbledore pressed. For some, certainly, Minerva conceded. But not so dangerous as to justify systematically ignoring a child's well-being for years on end. After Minerva was dismissed, several other witnesses took the stand, goblin healers who detailed the harmful effects of long-term compulsion charms on developing magical children, financial experts who analyzed the suspicious patterns of withdrawals from the Potter vaults, and even a reluctant Arabella Figg, who admitted she had been stationed in Little Whinging to monitor Harry but had been instructed to report only direct threats, not signs of neglect or mistreatment. Throughout it all, Harry watched Dumbledore carefully. The old wizard maintained his composed exterior, but Harry thought he could detect growing tension in the way he steepled his fingers or adjusted his half-moon spectacles. The testimony was damaging, systematically dismantling his narrative of necessary protection. Finally, it was Harry's turn to speak. As he made his way to the witness chair, he felt a momentary surge of panic. He was only 4 years old, facing the most powerful wizard of the age in front of Britain's entire magical government. What if he couldn't find the right words? What if Dumbledore somehow reactivated the compulsions with a hidden spell? But as he settled into the chair, which magically adjusted to his small size, Harry felt something else rise within him, the same determination that had helped him break free of Dumbledore's bindings in the first place. He had prepared for this. He knew his own truth. And he wouldn't let fear silence him. Mr. Potter, Amelia began gently after he had been sworn in, could you tell the court about your life with the Dursley family? Harry took a deep breath. They kept me in a cupboard under the stairs, he said, his voice small but clear in the suddenly silent chamber. That was my bedroom from when they took me in until the night I left. They told me my parents died in a car crash because my dad was drunk. They called me Freak instead of my name most of the time. He continued, describing the neglect, the hand-me-down clothes, the regular meals denied as punishment, and the occasional physical discipline from Uncle Vernon. He explained how Dudley and his friends had made Harry hunting their favorite game, and how any signs of accidental magic had resulted in being locked in the cupboard for days. Did you ever tell anyone about how you were treated? Amelia asked. Harry shook his head. I tried telling a teacher once at school, but afterward, she seemed to forget we had talked. I think now that might have been because of the compulsion charms. There was one that made adults not notice or care much about me. This revelation caused another stir in the chamber. The idea that compulsion magic had been used not just on Harry but indirectly on others who might have helped him was deeply disturbing. Mr. Potter, how did you feel when you learned about the compulsion charms that had been placed on you? Harry's expression grew more serious. Angry. And sad. And, violated, I think is the word. Like someone had been inside my head, changing who I was supposed to be. Some of the charms made me feel like I didn't deserve anything good, that I should be grateful for scraps of attention. Others made it hard to ask questions or stand up for myself. Now that they're gone, I can feel the difference. I can think more clearly. I'm not afraid all the time. When it was Dumbledore's turn to question Harry, the old wizard approached with apparent compassion. "Harry, my boy, I'm not your boy," Harry interrupted, unable to contain himself. "You don't get to call me that after what you did." Dumbledore paused, seeming genuinely taken aback by the direct challenge from one so young. He recovered quickly. "My apologies, Mr. Potter. I only wish to ask if you understand that the magical world can be a dangerous place, particularly for someone in your unique position." "I understand there are dangers," Harry replied carefully, remembering Griphook's coaching. "But that doesn't explain why you put spells on me to make me obedient and scared, or why you left me with people who hated magic, or why you took money from my family vaults. The compulsion charms were meant as protections." "No, they weren't," Harry cut in again, his green eyes flashing. "I've seen the list of exactly what each charm did. One made me feel uncomfortable asking questions. Another made me accept whatever adults told me without doubting them. Another suppressed my magical abilities so I couldn't defend myself even accidentally. Those aren't protections. They're controls." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Dumbledore seemed momentarily at a loss for words, confronted with such direct accusation from the child he'd sought to mold. "Mr. Potter," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm, "you are very young to understand the complexities of magical protection. What may seem like control to you was in fact a carefully constructed shield, like the shield that let Uncle Vernon lock me in a cupboard for days when I was 3 because the houseplants grew back after Aunt Petunia cut them down." Harry challenged. "Or the shield that made sure I never got enough food while the Dursleys were being paid hundreds of pounds a month from my own vaults to take care of me?" Before Dumbledore could respond, Harry continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke from the heart. "I may be young, but I know the difference between protection and control. My parents died protecting me. They loved me enough to stand between me and Voldemort without any shields except their own bodies. What you did wasn't protection. It was using me, like a thing instead of a person." The chamber had gone completely still, every eye fixed on the small boy confronting one of the most powerful wizards alive with nothing but raw truth as his weapon. Dumbledore's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, something like genuine regret flickering across his features. "Perhaps," he acknowledged quietly, "in my focus on the greater dangers, I lost sight of the immediate needs of the child before me. For that, I am truly sorry." The apology caught Harry by surprise. For a moment, he almost felt the pull of the grandfatherly persona Dumbledore projected so skillfully. But then he remembered the healer's descriptions of the compulsions, how intricately they had been designed to make him malleable, obedient, and willing to sacrifice himself when the time came. "Your actions hurt me more than your words can fix," Harry stated simply. "I don't want your apology. I want you to leave me alone." Augusta Longbottom cleared her throat. "I believe that concludes Mr. Potter's testimony. You may step down, young man." As Harry returned to his seat beside Griphook, he felt simultaneously drained and strengthened. Facing Dumbledore directly had been terrifying, but also liberating. For the first time, he had spoken his truth to the man who had manipulated his life from the shadows. "You did well," Griphook murmured approvingly. "Very well indeed." The hearing continued with final arguments from both sides. Amelia emphasized the pattern of deliberate deception and control that characterized Dumbledore's actions, while Dumbledore reiterated his position that extraordinary circumstances had required extraordinary measures. Finally, Augusta called for a recess to allow the Wizengamot to deliberate. Harry was escorted to a small antechamber where he could rest and have something to eat while waiting for the decision. "How long will it take?" he asked Amelia, who had joined them in the antechamber. "It's hard to say," she replied. "The evidence is clear, but Dumbledore has decades of political capital and goodwill to draw upon. Some members will struggle to vote against him regardless of the facts." Harry nodded, picking at the sandwich a court attendant had brought him. Despite his hunger, his stomach felt too knotted with tension to eat much. What happens if they decide in his favor? He asked quietly, voicing the fear that had lurked in the back of his mind throughout the proceedings. Griphook and Amelia exchanged glances. We have contingency plans, the Goblin assured him. The Potter family has holdings outside Britain. If necessary, we could arrange for you to continue your education elsewhere, beyond Dumbledore's reach. But it shouldn't come to that, Amelia added quickly. The evidence is overwhelming, and public opinion has shifted significantly since the publication of your parents' wills. Even Dumbledore's most loyal supporters are finding his actions difficult to justify. Before Harry could respond, the door opened to admit an unexpected visitor, Minerva McGonagall. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, her usual brisk manner softened by evident concern. I wanted to check on Harry before returning to the chamber. Professor, Harry greeted her with a small smile. Minerva had visited him several times at Gringotts over the past weeks, sharing stories about his parents and gradually earning his trust. She approached and knelt to his eye level, a surprisingly informal gesture from the typically proper witch. You were extraordinarily brave in there, Harry. Your parents would be very proud of how you stood your ground. Do you think the Wizengamot will believe me? He asked anxiously. I believe many already do, she assured him. Your testimony was compelling precisely because it was so straightforward and honest. Even those inclined to side with Albus seemed affected by your words. Their conversation was interrupted by a court official announcing that the Wizengamot had reached its decision more quickly than expected. As they made their way back to the main chamber, Harry felt his heart pounding. This was the moment that would determine his immediate future, whether he would remain under Goblin protection until Sirius recovered, or whether Dumbledore would regain control. The chamber was hushed as they retook their seats. Augusta Longbottom's expression revealed nothing as she prepared to announce the verdict. After careful deliberation, this body has reached decisions regarding both the guardianship of Harry James Potter and the charges against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. She unfurled an official parchment. Regarding guardianship, the Wizengamot recognizes that, according to the legally binding wills of James and Lily Potter, guardianship of their son should rightfully pass to Sirius Orion Black, who has now been cleared of all charges related to the events of October and November 1981. However, due to Mr. Black's ongoing treatment at St. Mungo's, he is not immediately able to assume these duties. Harry held his breath, fingers gripping the edge of his chair. Therefore, this body approves the joint temporary guardianship arrangement between Gringotts Bank, represented by account manager Griphook, and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, represented by Director Amelia Bones, until such time as Mr. Black is medically certified to assume his responsibilities as godfather. This arrangement shall be reviewed quarterly to ensure the child's needs are being appropriately met. Relief flooded through Harry. He wasn't going back to Dumbledore's control. He could continue learning about his heritage and developing his newly unbound magic under Griphook's guidance, with Amelia providing necessary legal protection. Regarding the charges against Albus Dumbledore, Augusta continued, her tone growing more severe. This body finds clear evidence of multiple violations of wizarding law, including illegal assumption of guardianship, improper management of an ancient house's assets, unauthorized use of compulsion charms on a minor, and obstruction of a legally binding will. She paused, allowing her words to reverberate through the silent chamber. While acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances of the time, this body cannot condone actions that so fundamentally violated both law and ethical principle, regardless of intent. Therefore, Albus Dumbledore is hereby removed permanently from any role related to the guardianship, education, or management of Harry Potter's person, magic, or assets. Find the sum of 100,000 galleons, to be paid to the Potter estate as restitution, with an additional 50,000 galleons to fund improved oversight of magical orphan placement. Placed on probation in his role as headmaster of Hogwarts, with additional oversight from the Board of Governors for a period of not less than 5 years. Required to relinquish his position as Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, as this body cannot in good conscience allow someone who has demonstrated such disregard for magical law to represent Britain on the international stage. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. The penalties were more severe than most had anticipated, particularly the forced resignation from the ICW. Harry glanced at Dumbledore and was surprised to see the old wizard looking not angry but deeply weary, as though a great weight had settled upon him. "This ruling is final and binding," Augusta concluded. "Let the record show that it was approved by a vote of 39 to 11. This special session of the Wisengamot is hereby adjourned." The sharp crack of her gavel echoed through the chamber, and immediately the room erupted in noise as members began discussing the unprecedented ruling and reporters rushed to file their stories. "We won," Harry whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "Justice prevailed," Griphook corrected gently. "As it should, though often does not in wizard courts." As they prepared to leave, Harry noticed Dumbledore making his way toward them, causing Griphook to tense protectively. The old wizard stopped a respectful distance away, his usual twinkling demeanor subdued. "Mr. Potter," he said formally, "I wish to convey, regardless of today's ruling, that my actions were never motivated by malice, but by a genuine belief in what was necessary for both your safety and the greater good." Harry regarded him steadily, finding it easier now to meet those piercing blue eyes without feeling intimidated. "Maybe you believe that," he replied. "But good intentions don't make what you did right. And they don't change what I went through because of your decisions." "No," Dumbledore agreed softly, "they do not. Perhaps someday, when you're older, we might speak again, and I could explain more fully the dangers that influenced my choices." "Perhaps," Harry allowed, though he felt no desire for such a conversation. "But it will be my choice if and when that happens. Not yours." Something like respect flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. "As you wish. I shall respect the Wisengamot's ruling completely." He inclined his head in a small bow. "May your path forward be brighter than the one behind you." With that, he turned and moved away through the dispersing crowd, somehow looking both more and less than the legendary figure Harry had confronted. For the first time, Harry saw him not as an all-powerful manipulator, but as an old man who had convinced himself that the end justified any means, and was now facing the consequences of that belief. The weeks following the Wisengamot hearing brought dramatic changes throughout Wizarding Britain. The Daily Prophet, which had initially hedged its coverage of the allegations against Dumbledore, now published detailed analyses of the case and its implications. Public opinion, already shifting after the publication of the Potter Wills and the Quibbler, solidified against the former Chief Warlock as the full extent of his manipulations became common knowledge. At Hogwarts, the Board of Governors implemented new oversight measures, with Minerva McGonagall taking on additional responsibilities to balance Dumbledore's reduced authority. Several parents who had withdrawn their children after the initial revelations cautiously allowed them to return, reassured by the new safeguards. For Harry, life settled into a productive routine divided between Gringotts and the secure country estate that Amelia had arranged as his primary residence. Each morning brought lessons with various tutors, goblin and human alike, covering everything from basic magical theory to wizarding customs and the responsibilities of an heir to an ancient house. "Your magical development is progressing at an extraordinary rate," observed Silverthread during one of their regular sessions. "Without the binding suppressing your natural abilities, you're advancing far beyond typical expectations for a child your age." Harry concentrated on the feather floating above his palm, carefully directing it to trace a figure-8 pattern in the air. He still used his father's wand for more complex spell work, but simple levitation and basic elemental magic had become almost effortless to perform wandlessly. "Is that because of whatever happened the night Voldemort attacked me?" he asked, maintaining his focus on the feather. "Or just because the bindings are gone?" "Likely a combination," Silverthread replied thoughtfully. "The magical surge that occurred when the binding charms broke seems to have reset your magical pathways in a uniquely efficient configuration. It's as though your magic, after being constrained for so long, is now compensating by flowing more powerfully than before." "Like a river breaking through a dam," Harry suggested, remembering something he'd read in a geography book. "An apt analogy," the Goblin approved. "Though unlike a destructive flood, your magic is remarkably controlled for one so young." Your innate connection to your core is unusually strong. These practical lessons were complemented by regular visits from allies who had emerged during the legal battle. Amelia often brought her niece Susan, a friendly redhead who initially seemed shy around Harry but quickly warmed to him. Augusta Longbottom introduced her grandson Neville, a quiet boy who shared Harry's birthday and whose parents, like Harry's, had been targeted by Voldemort's followers. There in St. Mungo's, Neville confided during their second meeting, as they explored the gardens of Harry's new home. Not dead, but not really, here. He gestured vaguely at his head. The bad wizards tortured them until their minds broke. Harry, who had been gradually learning about the horrors of the Wizarding War, felt a surge of empathy for his new friend. "I'm sorry, Neville. That's awful." Neville nodded sadly. "Gran says they were heroes, like your parents. They fought you-know-who 3 times too, just like your mum and dad." Something clicked in Harry's mind. "Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies," he murmured, recalling the prophecy. "What's that?" Neville asked. Harry hesitated, unsure whether to share the prophecy's contents. He'd been told it was dangerous information that could put others at risk. But something about Neville's quiet dignity made him feel they were connected by more than just circumstance. There was a prophecy, he explained carefully. About a baby born at the end of July to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times. That baby was supposed to have the power to defeat him. Neville's eyes widened. "But that could have been me too. I was born July 30th, and Gran always says my parents stood against you-know-who 3 times before they were attacked." "I know," Harry said. "I think that's why they were targeted after my parents. Voldemort or his followers might have thought the prophecy could have meant either of us." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 boys contemplating the cosmic forces that had shaped their lives before they could even form memories. "Do you think it matters?" Neville finally asked. "The prophecy, I mean." Harry thought about this, remembering his conversations with Griphook about the nature of prophecies. "I think it only matters if people make decisions because of it. Voldemort made it matter when he attacked our families. Dumbledore made it matter when he tried to control my whole life because of it. But you don't have to let it control you now," Neville observed with surprising insight. "Exactly," Harry agreed, feeling a growing kinship with this thoughtful boy who had also lost so much to the Wizarding War. "And neither do you." The most significant development in Harry's new life came nearly 2 months after the Wisengamot hearing, when Amelia arrived for her regular visit with unexpected news. "The healers at St. Mungo's have cleared Sirius for visitors," she announced, unable to suppress a smile at Harry's immediate excitement. "He's still recovering, but his progress has been remarkable. They attribute much of his improvement to having a purpose, getting well enough to be reunited with you." "When can I see him?" Harry asked eagerly, nearly bouncing with anticipation. "Tomorrow, if you wish," Amelia replied. "I've already made arrangements with his treatment team. They caution that he still has difficult days, and his appearance may be shocking at first. Azkaban is a terrible place that leaves its mark on prisoners. But he's asked for you repeatedly, and the healers believe seeing you would be beneficial for his continued recovery." The next day, Harry found himself in a private room at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, nervously waiting for his first meeting with his godfather. Griphook had accompanied him, along with Amelia, both to provide security and emotional support. "Remember," Amelia advised gently, "he may tire quickly or become emotional. The healers suggest keeping this first visit relatively brief." Harry nodded, his stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He had been told stories about Sirius Black, his father's best friend, his designated godfather, wrongfully imprisoned for years, but had no personal memories of the man. What if Sirius didn't like him? What if Harry wasn't what he expected? The door opened, and a healer entered, followed by a tall, gaunt man with long black hair and deep-set eyes that held both shadows and a flickering light of hope. Sirius Black moved carefully, as though still becoming reacquainted with his own body, but his gaze fixed immediately on Harry with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. "Harry," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "Merlin's beard, look at you." For a moment, neither moved, each taking in the other across the small space that separated them. Then, with a few uncertain steps, Sirius crossed to where Harry stood and knelt before him, bringing them to eye level. Up close, Harry could see the ravages of Azkaban, the hollowed cheeks, the premature lines around his eyes, the haunted quality that lingered behind his gaze. But he could also see warmth there, and a desperate kind of hope. "You look so much like James," Sirius said softly. "But you have my mother's eyes," Harry finished, having heard this observation from nearly everyone who had known his parents. "I know." A surprised laugh escaped Sirius, a rusty sound, as though long unpracticed. "Already tired of hearing that, are you? Can't say I blame you." His expression grew more serious. "I'm so sorry, Harry. I should have been there for you all these years. Instead of chasing after the rat, I should have stayed with you. It's my biggest regret." Harry wasn't entirely sure what Sirius meant about chasing a rat, but he understood the core of the apology. "It wasn't your fault," he said firmly. "You didn't get a trial. Dumbledore knew you were innocent and left you there anyway." A flash of something dark crossed Sirius's features at the mention of Dumbledore, but he seemed to push it aside with visible effort. "What matters now is that I'm out, and you're safe, and somehow you've managed to shake the wizarding world to its foundations before your 5th birthday." A hint of pride entered his voice. "James would be laughing himself silly over how you've upended Dumbledore's carefully arranged chessboard." The visit continued for nearly an hour, longer than the healers had initially recommended but tolerated as they observed the positive effect on both patients. Sirius shared stories about Harry's parents, not just the sanitized versions others had offered, but real anecdotes that captured James's mischievous spirit and Lily's fierce intelligence. "Your dad once transfigured all the suits of armor on the 3rd floor to sing romantic ballads whenever Lily walked past," he recalled, eyes brightening with the memory. "She was furious, hexed him so his hair turned a different color every hour for a week. But she was secretly impressed by the charm work. That was 5th year, when she still claimed to despise him." Harry soaked up these stories eagerly, each one adding another brushstroke to the portrait he was building of his parents. Not mythic figures who had died heroically, though they had, but real people who had pranked and argued and lived. Eventually, Sirius's energy began to flag, his sentences growing shorter as fatigue set in. The lead healer, who had been monitoring from a discreet distance, stepped forward. "I think that's enough for today," she said kindly but firmly. "Mr. Black still needs considerable rest as part of his recovery." Sirius looked like he wanted to protest but nodded reluctantly. "The dragon in white is right, I'm afraid. But I'll be better soon, Harry, I promise. The healers say another month of treatment, and I should be stable enough for supervised outings. Maybe by Christmas, I could even." He trailed off, clearly not wanting to make promises he might not be able to keep. "It's okay," Harry assured him, showing maturity beyond his years. "I'll visit again soon. And I'm not going anywhere." As they prepared to leave, Sirius caught Harry's hand. "I want you to know," he said, his voice suddenly intense, "that no matter how long it takes me to recover, I'm going to be there for you. Properly, the way James and Lily wanted. I swore an oath to them when they named me your godfather, and I intend to keep it." Harry felt a warm certainty settle in his chest. Despite the man's haggard appearance and evident fragility, there was something solid and trustworthy in Sirius's determination. For the first time, Harry could truly envision a future with something he'd never had before, a real family. "I know you will," he replied simply. As summer faded into autumn, Harry's life continued to transform in ways both large and small. The publicity surrounding his case gradually diminished as the wizarding press found new scandals to occupy them, allowing Harry more freedom to explore the world that should have been his birthright. Griphook arranged carefully supervised visits to various wizarding locations, Diagon Alley, of course, but also the magical village of Hogsmeade, the ancient stone circles at Avebury where magical ley lines converged in visible patterns for those with the sight to see them, and even a brief, security-heavy excursion to the Quidditch World Cup qualifying match between England and Portugal. The wizarding world is your heritage, Griphook explained as they walked through the magical market in Avebury, where traders had gathered since before Hogwarts was founded. You should know it in all its variety, not just the sanitized version Dumbledore would have eventually introduced you to. Harry absorbed these experiences with the boundless curiosity of childhood, asking questions about everything from the magical creatures he encountered to the complex social hierarchies that governed wizarding society. His unbound magic continued to develop at an accelerated rate, occasionally manifesting in surprising ways that both delighted and concerned his tutors. "Your affinity for defensive magic is remarkable," commented Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt, who had begun providing basic security training at Amelia's request. "Most children struggle to produce even a simple shield charm before their Hogwarts years, yet you've mastered the standard Protego after just a few weeks of practice." They were in the training room of Harry's country estate, a space that had been specially warded for magical practice. Harry lowered his father's wand, the shield charm he'd been maintaining dissipating like mist. "It just feels natural," Harry tried to explain. "Like my magic knows what to do before I even finish thinking about it." Kingsley nodded thoughtfully. "Some wizards have natural affinities for certain branches of magic. Your father had a remarkable talent for transfiguration, while your mother excelled at charms and protective enchantments. You may have inherited elements of both." "Or," suggested Griphook, who was observing the session, "his magic developed this affinity as a response to the threats it detected." Magic can be adaptive, particularly in young wizards still forming their core pathways. Regardless of the explanation, Harry's magical education continued to advance well beyond what would be typical for a child his age. By late autumn, he had mastered not just basic charms and transfigurations, but had begun exploring more complex magical theory under the guidance of specialists in various fields. Parallel to this magical development, Harry's understanding of his family legacy deepened through regular sessions with historians and Potter family records recovered from various sources. The Potters, he learned, had been a prominent family in magical Britain since at least the 12th century, with a tradition of innovation in magical crafting, particularly in the creation of enchanted objects. "Your great-grandfather Fleamont revolutionized magical hair care products," explained Andromeda Tonks, a historian specializing in magical inventions who had been engaged to teach Harry about his family's achievements. "He created Sleek Easy's hair potion, which tripled the family fortune before he sold the company upon retirement." Harry ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair with a grin. "Doesn't seem like he used much of it himself, based on the family photos." Andromeda laughed. "Indeed not. The Potter hair seems remarkably resistant even to its creator's potions. But the family's inventive streak goes back much further. Your ancestors created some of the first self-stirring cauldrons, developed improved broomstick charms, and even contributed to the enchantment work on the Hogwarts Express. Is that why we have so many patents in the asset listings?" Harry asked, recalling the complex financial documents Griphook had been patiently helping him understand. "Precisely," Andromeda confirmed, looking impressed by the connection. "The Potter family has historically earned significant income from magical innovation rather than relying solely on inherited wealth or political position. It's one reason your family maintained relative independence from the more politically entangled houses." This independent streak was something Harry found himself increasingly drawn to as he learned more about his heritage. Unlike some of the oldest families who were deeply embedded in, and sometimes constrained by, traditional power structures, the Potters had maintained a reputation for charting their own course. "Your grandfather Charles was offered a seat on the Wizengamot 3 times, Amelia told him during one of their regular discussions about wizarding governance. He declined each time, preferring to influence policy through innovation and philanthropic work rather than direct political engagement." "Why?" Harry asked, curious about this apparently unusual choice. "He believed, not without reason, that the Wizengamot structure encouraged stagnation rather than progress," Amelia explained. The hereditary seats tend to reinforce existing power structures, while the appointed seats often go to those who align with prevailing political winds. He preferred to remain independent. This family tradition of independent thinking resonated deeply with Harry, who had already developed a healthy skepticism toward authority figures after his experiences with both the Dursleys and Dumbledore. He found himself drawn to the idea of forging his own path rather than simply fitting into the role others might expect of the boy who lived. As November arrived, bringing with it the first hints of winter, preparations began for what would be a significant milestone, Harry's first real Christmas celebration. Sirius, whose recovery had continued steadily if not as rapidly as he'd hoped, was determined to make the holiday special. "I've been cleared for a 3-day supervised release over Christmas," he announced during one of Harry's regular visits to St. Mungo's. His appearance had improved markedly, though still thin, his face had filled out, and his eyes held more light than shadow now. "The healers insist I have a medical monitor present, but we'll make it work. I'm thinking we should host a proper gathering, invite Remus, the Tonkses, maybe the Longbottoms and little Susan Bones if her aunt isn't busy with DMLE business." Harry, who had never experienced a family Christmas before, found himself both excited and slightly overwhelmed by the prospect. "That sounds brilliant. But where would we have it? The country house is nice, but it's temporary," Sirius finished for him. "No, I was thinking we might use my family's London house. It's a grim old place, no pun intended, but it's magically secure and belongs to me now that I'm legally cleared. We could clean up the main rooms, decorate properly, make it festive enough to overcome the general aura of dark pure-blood nonsense." The preparations for this Christmas gathering became a project that energized not just Harry and Sirius, but their growing circle of allies and friends. Remus Lupin, recently returned from an extended stay abroad, threw himself into the rehabilitation of the ancient black family home at 12, Grimmauld Place, working alongside house elves to make at least portions of it habitable and festive. "The portrait of Sirius's mother is proving challenging," Remus reported during a planning session at Harry's country house. The mild-mannered wizard had quickly become one of Harry's favorite adults, patient, kind, and full of stories about his parents that complemented Sirius's more rambunctious tales. "We've managed to contain her behind heavy curtains, but removing her permanently may require breaking the permanent sticking charm, which could damage the structural integrity of the wall." "Can't you just remove the whole wall?" Harry suggested pragmatically. Remus blinked, then laughed. "Out of the mouths of babes. That's actually not a bad idea, the wall isn't load-bearing. Sirius will love it, one more way to defy his family's legacy." As the holiday approached, Harry found himself at the center of a growing network of relationships that had begun to feel like the family he'd never had. There was Sirius, of course, gradually reclaiming his role as godfather despite ongoing health challenges. Remus, whose quiet wisdom provided a perfect counterbalance to Sirius's more impulsive nature. Griphook, whose formal manner had slowly warmed into something approaching affection as he guided Harry through the complexities of his inheritance. Then there were the newer connections, Neville, who visited regularly for play dates that doubled as informal magical practice, Susan Bones, whose cheerful disposition helped draw Harry out of his lingering shyness, and occasionally the Greengrass sisters, Daphne and Astoria, whose parents had recently reclaimed the fosterage arrangement specified in Lily Potter's ancillary documents. "It's rather extraordinary," Minerva McGonagall commented during a December visit. "In trying to isolate you, Albus inadvertently created the circumstances that have now connected you to a much broader network than you might have had otherwise. The publicity around your case brought people forward who might never have realized their connections to your parents." Harry, who was helping her wrap Christmas gifts for the upcoming gathering, considered this. "Do you think he regrets what he did?" he asked, carefully folding colorful paper around a book on magical flora for Neville. "Dumbledore, I mean." Minerva's hands stilled momentarily. "I believe he regrets the outcome, losing control of your development and suffering public censure. Whether he regrets the actual harm his actions caused you." She sighed. "Albus has always had difficulty separating his grand vision from the human cost of achieving it. It's his greatest flaw as a leader. Has he tried to contact you about me? Harry asked, knowing that Minerva still worked with Dumbledore daily at Hogwarts, albeit under the new oversight arrangements. Occasionally, she admitted. He maintains that his intentions were protective, though he has acknowledged that his methods were problematic. The Board of Governors' restrictions have curtailed his authority considerably, but he remains influential within the school. Harry nodded, processing this information. He had gradually come to a place where thoughts of Dumbledore no longer triggered immediate anger, though he remained wary of the old wizard's potential influence. I don't hate him, he said after a moment, surprising himself with the realization. I just don't want him making decisions for me anymore. Minerva's expression softened. That's a remarkably mature perspective, Harry. Many adults struggle to separate righteous anger from hatred. Griphook says hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, Harry explained, quoting one of the Goblin's frequent philosophical observations. It takes too much energy to maintain. Wise advice, Minerva approved, resuming her gift wrapping. Now, shall we finish these presents? I believe we still have several more to go before dinner. The Christmas celebration at the partially renovated Grimmauld Place became a turning point in Harry's new life. Despite the house's lingering gloominess in certain areas, the main rooms had been transformed with evergreen garlands, floating magical lights, and a towering Christmas tree that nearly reached the 12-foot ceiling of the drawing room. For 3 days, the ancient townhouse echoed with laughter, conversation, and occasionally, happy chaos as Harry experienced his first true family holiday. Sirius, though still requiring periods of rest under the watchful eye of his assigned healer, threw himself into the role of host with enthusiasm that belied his ongoing recovery. This, he declared on Christmas morning as the assembled guests gathered around the tree, is how it always should have been. Friends together, family by choice if not always by blood, celebrating without fear. He raised his glass of pumpkin juice, alcohol still being restricted by his treatment plan, in a toast. To absent friends, especially James and Lily, who should be here watching their son open his first proper Christmas presents. And to new beginnings for all of us. The pile of gifts for Harry was overwhelming, not just in quantity but in thoughtfulness. Books on magical subjects from Remus and Minerva. A child-sized practice broom from Sirius that could hover safely a few feet off the ground. A specially commissioned set of robes from the Tonks family bearing the Potter crest. A rare plant from Neville that bloomed with tiny lights in the dark. A goblin-crafted wand holster from Griphook that would adjust as Harry grew. But perhaps the most meaningful gift came in a simple envelope, handed to Harry quietly as the festivities wound down on the final evening. Amelia Bones presented it with an uncharacteristically tender smile. This just came through officially this morning, she explained as Harry opened the envelope to find formal legal documents. With Sirius's continued progress and the successful holiday visit, the healers have signed off on the transition plan. By your birthday next summer, assuming all continues well, Sirius will assume full guardianship as your parents intended. Harry looked up, eyes wide. Really? No more reviews or hearings or anything? There will still be regular check-ins, Amelia clarified. But the legal pathway is now clear. The joint Goblin DMLE guardianship will transition gradually to Sirius over the next 7 months, with increased visitation and overnight stays as his health permits. Across the room, Sirius watched anxiously, clearly wanting to ensure this was what Harry truly wanted. Harry broke into a wide smile and hurried over to hug his godfather tightly. We're going to be a proper family, he said, voice muffled against Sirius's jumper. Sirius returned the embrace, his eyes suspiciously bright. Just as your parents wanted, pup. It's taken far too long, but we're finally setting things right. As the gathering eventually dispersed, with guests departing through the flue or by side-along apparition, Harry found himself standing with Sirius and Remus in the entrance hall, the three of them sharing a moment of quiet contentment amid the aftermath of celebration. So, Sirius said, his arm draped casually across Harry's shoulders, what do you think about making this place properly livable by summer? It would need a complete overhaul, exorcising some literal and metaphorical ghosts, but it's in the heart of London, magically secure, and has enough history that we could make it our own. You want us to live here? Harry asked, looking around at the ancient townhouse with its mixed history. Only if you want to, Sirius assured him quickly. We could look at Potter properties instead. There's a lovely cottage in Godric's Hollow that could be restored, or the manor house in Devon that's been in your family for generations. Harry considered the options thoughtfully. I think I'd like to see all of them before deciding, he said. But I like the idea of fixing this place up. It feels like reclaiming something, turning it from dark to light. Remus smiled approvingly. That's very much what your mother would have said. She had a gift for seeing the potential beneath the surface. Speaking of reclaiming things, Sirius added, his tone becoming more serious, there's the matter of your education leading up to Hogwarts. Now that the immediate legal battles are settled, we should think about a more structured approach. You've made remarkable progress with your various tutors, but as you get older, you'll need a more comprehensive plan. Harry nodded, having already given this some thought. I'd like to keep learning from Griphook about goblin magic and financial management, he said. And maybe Neville and Susan could join some of my lessons. Neville's Gran says he needs more confidence with his magic, and Susan's always asking questions about what I'm learning. A small study group, Remus mused, looking intrigued by the idea. We could develop a curriculum that prepares you all for Hogwarts while addressing topics the school typically overlooks, magical theory, wizarding culture and governance, even some basics of other magical traditions. Like a mini-school? Harry asked, warming to the concept. More like the traditional preparation heirs to magical houses used to receive before Hogwarts standardized education, Sirius explained. My parents hired private tutors for me and my brother. James had similar arrangements, though much less strict and dark-oriented than the Black family version. The conversation continued as they made their way to the kitchen for a final cup of hot chocolate before Harry would return to the country house with Griphook. As they planned and dreamed about the future, Harry felt a deep sense of rightness settling over him. After years of confinement and limitation under the Dursleys and Dumbledore's manipulations, his world was expanding in all directions, not just in physical freedom, but in knowledge, relationships, and possibilities. On a cold January morning, Albus Dumbledore sat alone in his office at Hogwarts, reviewing student applications for the coming year. His authority had been curtailed in many ways since the Potter hearing, but the day-to-day administration of the school remained largely in his hands, albeit with increased oversight from both Minerva and the Board of Governors. A knock at his door interrupted his work. Enter, he called, looking up to find Severus Snape standing at the threshold, his expression typically inscrutable. You asked to see me, Headmaster. The potions master's tone was formal, the slight emphasis on Dumbledore's title a subtle reminder of how their relationship had shifted since the revelations about Harry Potter. Yes, Severus. Please, sit. Dumbledore gestured to the chair across from his desk. I've received some concerning information I wanted to discuss with you. Snape took the seat with characteristic economy of movement. Concerning in what way? It appears, Dumbledore said carefully, that young Harry is receiving an education that goes well beyond what is typical or advisable for a child his age. According to my sources, he's already performing magic that many first years at Hogwarts would struggle with, including defensive spells. Snape's expression didn't change. And this concerns you because accelerated magical education without proper ethical grounding can lead to dangerous imbalances, Dumbledore explained. Particularly in a child with Harry's magical potential and destiny. His destiny, Snape repeated, the quotation marks audible in his tone. You still believe the prophecy dictates a specific path for the boy? The prophecy is merely a signpost pointing to what was always inevitable, Dumbledore replied. Voldemort marked Harry as his equal that night. Their fates are intertwined, regardless of how Harry is raised. My concern is whether he is being prepared with the proper values and understanding to face what lies ahead. And you believe you should still have a role in determining those proper values, Snape observed, despite the Wisengamot's ruling and the clear evidence of your previous miscalculations. Dumbledore sighed. I made mistakes in my methods, Severus. I acknowledge that freely. But the underlying purpose remains valid. When Voldemort returns, and he will return, Harry must be ready to face him. Not just magically, but morally and emotionally. And you don't trust Black and Lupin to instill appropriate values? Snape's lip curled slightly at the mention of his old school rivals. Sirius is a brave man, but impulsive and still recovering from significant trauma. Remus is wise but constrained by his condition and the prejudices surrounding it. Neither fully understands the scope of what Harry may eventually face. Snape was silent for a moment, studying Dumbledore with penetrating eyes. What exactly are you asking of me, Headmaster? I'm prohibited from approaching Potter directly, as are you. Observation, primarily, Dumbledore said. Through your connections in various circles. I merely wish to ensure that Harry is not being led down potentially problematic paths in his magical education. Such as? There are rumors of goblin magic being incorporated into his training, Dumbledore noted with a frown. While not dark in the traditional sense, goblin magical traditions operate on fundamentally different principles than wizard magic. Similarly, I've heard concerning reports about access to certain restricted Potter family materials that might contain magics too advanced or dangerous for a child to properly contextualize. Snape's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes. You're asking me to spy on Lily's son. Again. I'm asking you to help protect him, Dumbledore corrected. As you promised to do. I did promise that, Snape acknowledged. But I've come to question whether your definition of protection aligns with what Lily would have wanted for her child. He stood abruptly. I will keep my eyes open, as I always do. But I will not actively interfere with Potter's current arrangements unless I see clear evidence of actual harm, not merely development that diverges from your preferred path. Dumbledore looked disappointed but not surprised. That is all I can ask, I suppose. Thank you for your time, Severus. As the potions master departed, Dumbledore turned to gaze out the window at the snow-covered grounds of Hogwarts. The setbacks of recent months had been significant, but he had weathered political storms before. The essential truth remained unchanged: Tom Riddle would return, and when he did, Harry Potter would be central to defeating him once and for all. The boy was developing in ways Dumbledore hadn't anticipated or planned for, gaining allies and knowledge that might complicate the carefully considered path that had once seemed so clear. But perhaps, Dumbledore reflected, adaptation rather than control was now the wisest approach. He would watch, wait, and when the time was right, find new ways to guide, not force, Harry toward the destiny that awaited him. Whether the boy would eventually forgive him remained to be seen. But some prices were worth paying for the greater good. That, at least, had not changed. Spring arrived in a riot of color at the Potter country estate, where Harry stood in the garden with Neville, Susan, and the Greengrass sisters, practicing a complex charm under Remus's watchful eye. The informal study group that had begun as a casual suggestion at Christmas had evolved into a regular educational program, with different specialists rotating through to teach various subjects 3 days each week. Remember to visualize the pattern before you cast, Remus reminded them as they attempted to create floating light formations, a challenging exercise in magical control for young wizards. Magic responds to intent and imagery as much as to words and wand movements. Harry closed his eyes briefly, picturing the constellation Phoenix in his mind, then opened them and moved his father's wand in the precise pattern Remus had demonstrated. Luminous formatio, he incanted clearly. Points of golden light emerged from his wand, arranging themselves in the exact celestial configuration he had visualized. The other children made sounds of appreciation, then returned to their own attempts with renewed determination. Excellent, Harry, Remus approved. Your control is improving remarkably. The past few months had seen steady progress not just in Harry's magical education, but in the overall plan for his future. Sirius, now well enough to make extended visits away from St. Mungo's, had begun the process of renovating Grimmauld Place with enthusiasm that occasionally outstripped his still recovering strength. The most satisfying moment had been the removal of Walburga Black's portrait, accomplished exactly as Harry had suggested, by simply removing the entire wall and rebuilding it with modern magical architectural techniques. "It's symbolic," Sirius had declared as they watched construction wizards install the new wall. "Breaking down the old pureblood fanaticism and building something better in its place." Harry's relationship with the Goblin Nation had also continued to evolve in unexpected ways. What had begun as an emergency intervention had developed into something closer to a cultural exchange, with Harry spending one day each week at Gringotts continuing his financial education and learning aspects of goblin magic rarely taught to wizards. "Your approach to metal-based enchantment shows promise," Gornick, a master craftsman who had joined Griphook in Harry's goblin education, observed during one session. "Your magic has an unusual flexibility, less rigid than most wizards, more adaptable to different magical paradigms. Is that because of what happened when the bindings broke?" Harry asked, carefully inscribing runes onto a small silver disc under Gornick's guidance. "Partially," the goblin acknowledged. "But also, I suspect, because you're learning multiple magical traditions simultaneously at such a young age. Most wizards are taught only their own tradition until much later, by which time their magical pathways have become more fixed." This integrative approach to Harry's education had become one of its most distinctive features. Rather than focusing solely on traditional wizard magic as taught at Hogwarts, his curriculum incorporated elements of goblin crafting magic, house elf environmental magic, taught by a free elf named Libby whom Sirius had hired, and even some theoretical understanding of centaur astronomical magic shared by Firenze, a centaur from the Forbidden Forest who had developed an unusual interest in wizard-centaur relations. "You're receiving an education unlike any wizard in centuries," Amelia commented during one of her regular visits to review Harry's progress. "In many ways, it's closer to how magical education functioned before the establishment of formal schools, apprentice-style learning across multiple traditions." "Will that cause problems when I go to Hogwarts?" Harry asked, having occasionally wondered whether his unconventional preparation might make the transition to formal schooling difficult. Amelia considered the question. "It may present certain challenges. Hogwarts tends to teach a standardized approach to magic, and some professors might find your broader foundation either confusing or threatening. But it will also give you advantages, perspectives and techniques other students won't have encountered." As summer approached, bringing Harry's 5th birthday on the horizon, final preparations began for the transition to Sirius's full guardianship. The healers had signed off on his recovery, though he would continue with regular checkups and certain protective enchantments on his living quarters to monitor for any resurgence of Azkaban-related trauma. "The paperwork should be finalized by mid-July," Griphook explained during one of their financial management sessions. "After which my role will shift from guardian to financial advisor, though the Goblin Nation will maintain a special interest in your development given the circumstances of our initial involvement." Harry looked up from the ledger he'd been reviewing. "You'll still be part of my life, though, right? I mean, not just as a bank manager." The question seemed to catch the goblin off guard. After a moment, his normally stern expression softened slightly. "Yes, young Potter. Our connection has evolved beyond the typical wizard-goblin relationship. I would be disappointed if our association were reduced to mere financial transactions." "Good," Harry said with evident relief. "Because I've gotten used to having you around. You're like family now." Griphook cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional direction of the conversation but not displeased. "A most unusual family it would be. Now, let us return to the matter of diversifying your investment portfolio. The Muggle technology sector shows particular promise for the coming decade." As Harry's birthday approached, the final touches were put on Grimmauld Place's transformation. The once gloomy townhouse had been reimagined with light-enhancing charms, modern magical amenities, and a complete exorcism of the darker magical artifacts that had accumulated over generations of Black family occupation. The top floor had been converted into Harry's suite, bedroom, study, and a small practice room for magic, all designed to grow with him over the coming years. What do you think? Sirius asked anxiously as he showed Harry the completed rooms for the first time. Too much. Not enough. We can change anything you don't like. Harry turned slowly, taking in the space that would become his home. The bedroom walls were painted a deep blue reminiscent of the night sky, with constellations that actually twinkled subtly in the dim light. Bookshelves held a carefully curated collection of both magical and Muggle children's books. The study featured a desk sized for a child but designed to expand as he grew, positioned beneath a large window that overlooked the small garden they'd created in what had once been a dreary courtyard. But what caught Harry's attention most was the collection of photographs arranged on one wall, moving wizard photos showing his parents at various ages, Sirius and Remus in their school days, and newer images of the growing circle of friends and allies who had become part of Harry's life over the past year. "It's perfect," he said softly. "It feels like a real home." Sirius's anxious expression melted into relief and joy. "That's exactly what it's meant to be, pup. A real home, for both of us." The day of Harry's 5th birthday dawned clear and warm. Unlike the elaborate Christmas gathering, this celebration was planned as a more intimate affair, just the inner circle who had become Harry's chosen family over the tumultuous year since his accidental magic had shattered Dumbledore's compulsions and changed the course of his life. As guests began arriving at Grimmauld Place, now officially Harry's permanent residence, he found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From the cupboard under the stairs at Privet Drive to this beautifully renovated townhouse. From isolation and abuse to a network of caring adults and friends his own age. From magical suppression to an education that crossed boundaries few wizards ever explored. "Canute for your thoughts?" Remus asked, finding Harry watching the proceedings from a window seat in the drawing room. Harry smiled at his honorary uncle. "I was just thinking about everything that's changed. A year ago today, I was locked in my cupboard because Dudley's birthday cake exploded when he said I couldn't have any. And now look at you," Remus said, gesturing to the gathering. Sirius was entertaining Susan and Neville with animated stories. Amelia and Augusta were engaged in serious conversation by the fireplace. Grip Hook and a small delegation of goblins had arrived with ceremonial gifts. The Tonks family was helping arrange food on the enchanted buffet table. Surrounded by people who care about you, living as you were always meant to. "It's strange," Harry observed. "If my accidental magic hadn't been so strong that night, if it hadn't broken all those charms at once, none of this would have happened. I'd still be at the Dursleys, with all those spells controlling me, not even knowing about magic or my parents or any of you." Remus's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps. Or perhaps something else would have triggered a similar breakthrough eventually. Magic, especially in children, has a way of asserting itself when suppressed too forcefully. Like a river finding new channels when its natural course is blocked." "Dumbledore underestimated me," Harry said, not with pride but with simple recognition of fact. "He did," Remus agreed. "He underestimated your inherent magical strength, the protective measures your parents put in place, and perhaps most significantly, the network of people who would rally to your side once his manipulations were exposed." He smiled gently. "Your mother always said Dumbledore's greatest weakness was his tendency to see people as pieces in a grand strategy rather than as unpredictable individuals with their own power and agency." The conversation was interrupted by Sirius calling everyone to gather around the magnificent birthday cake that had just been brought out, a detailed confection in the shape of a castle that bore a striking resemblance to Hogwarts, complete with tiny moving staircases and miniature owls that flew around its towers. "Before Harry makes his wish and blows out the candles," Sirius announced, "I'd like to say a few words." He looked around at the assembled guests with undisguised emotion. "1 year ago, none of us could have predicted we'd be standing here today. Harry was trapped in an abusive home under magical suppression. I was wrongfully imprisoned in Azkaban. Many of you didn't even know the truth about what had happened to James and Lily." He placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "But thanks to this remarkable young wizard's extraordinary magic and even more extraordinary spirit, everything changed. Manipulations were exposed. Injustices were corrected. And slowly, we've begun to build something beautiful from the ruins of what Voldemort and, yes, Dumbledore destroyed. Raising his glass, Sirius continued, so today we're not just celebrating Harry turning 5. We're celebrating freedom, his, mine, and in many ways, the beginning of a broader freedom for magical Britain from the shadows of both dark and supposedly light manipulation. To Harry Potter, not the boy who lived, but the boy who broke free and helped others do the same. To Harry, the guests echoed, raising their glasses. As Harry looked around at the circle of faces illuminated by the 5 candles on his cake, loving, supportive faces that had been absent from his life just 1 year ago, he felt a sense of completeness that transcended the simple happiness of a birthday celebration. This was what his parents had wanted for him. This was what had been stolen and now reclaimed. He closed his eyes, made his wish, and blew out the candles to enthusiastic applause. The wish itself remained private, known only to him, but its essence was simple, that the family he had found would continue to grow and flourish, and that together they would build a future where no child would suffer as he had under the control of those who placed their own agendas above a child's well-being. As the cake was distributed and the celebration continued, Harry found himself standing beside Griphook, who had been observing the proceedings with typical Goblin reserve. "Thank you," Harry said simply. "For everything. For saving me that night. For teaching me. For believing in me." Griphook inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Your magic called out, and the Goblin nation answered. What began as obligation has become something more, a partnership that may, in time, help bridge the divide between our peoples." Harry smiled. "I'd like that. Not just for us, but for everyone." "A worthy ambition for the heir of House Potter," Griphook approved. "Now, I believe your godfather is attempting to organize some sort of game involving broomsticks indoors, which strikes me as precisely the kind of wizard foolishness that ends in property damage. Perhaps you should intervene before the chandeliers become casualties." Laughing, Harry hurried off to join the increasingly chaotic festivities, leaving the Goblin watching with what might almost have been interpreted as fondness, had anyone been observant enough to notice. The broken chains of the past had given way to new bonds of friendship, family, and purpose, bonds freely chosen rather than forcibly imposed. And as the summer sun began to set on Grimmauld Place, casting a golden glow through windows that had been dark for generations, it illuminated a truth as simple as it was powerful: sometimes the greatest magic comes not from spells or rituals, but from the indomitable spirit of a child who refuses to be controlled. One burst of accidental magic had changed everything. And the ripples of that change would continue to spread, reshaping the wizarding world in ways even prophecies could not predict. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.